In an age when the old world was breaking and empires that once seemed eternal began to fracture, a storm was gathering beyond the frontiers. From the endless steppes of the east came riders cloaked in fear and fire, the Huns. Behind them, waves of displaced peoples surged. The Goths, the Vandals, the Franks. They were called barbarians, outsiders, destroyers, but what rose in their wake would shape Europe for centuries. This is not just a tale of cities burned and emperors cast down. It is the story of a dying empire and the peoples who inherited its bones. The fall of Rome was not a moment, it was a transformation. And at the heart of it were these tribes, ruthless, ambitious, misunderstood. They didn't simply destroy, they built. New kingdoms, new laws, new identities. We begin in the east with the ghostly thunder of Hunnic hooves shaking the edge of civilization. We move west through the smoking gates of Rome, sacked by Alaric, into the fires of Carthage captured by the Vandals, and down into the blood-soaked plains of Gaul, where Frankish kings would rise to claim the future. From the shadows of collapse came a new world. This is the untold saga of the so-called barbarians, not just invaders, not just conquerors, but founders of medieval Europe. The whispers of the Huns swept across the ancient world like a phantom wind, carrying with them the promise of destruction. Long before their warriors could be seen, fear took root in the hearts of emperors, commanders, and common folk alike. They were an enigma, a storm brewing on the horizon, heralding the collapse of all that was thought unshakable. And at their helm stood a figure whose very name would cast a shadow over the centuries, Attila, the scourge of God. Who were these riders from the steppes? A people so swift, so unrelenting, that they seemed to appear from nowhere, like ghosts born of the earth itself. They came not to conquer and rule, but to annihilate, their war cries cutting through the din of battle like thunder in a darkened sky. Their arrival marked the twilight of an era, the death knell for the Roman world, and the birth of something terrifyingly new. Imagine the sound of hooves, thousands upon thousands of them, pounding the ground like a heartbeat of doom. The air thick with smoke and ash, as villages were reduced to nothing but smouldering ruins. The Huns were not merely a threat, they were a force of nature, an avalanche that no wall, no army, no empire could hold back. At the center of this chaos stood Attila, a man both feared and reviled, whose ambition knew no bounds. His very name became synonymous with destruction, whispered in dread by those who dared to resist. Was he a barbarian bent on destruction, or a visionary reshaping the ancient world in his own image? His rise was as meteoric as it was apocalyptic, forever changing the course of history. This is a tale of survival and annihilation, of fear and defiance. It is a journey into the heart of the ancient world's darkest hour, where the Huns rose from obscurity to dominate the imagination of all who lived through their wrath. The story of the Huns and their king Attila is not just history, it is legend. And now that legend begins. The origins of the Huns have long intrigued historians and scholars. Recent genetic studies and historical analyses have begun to shed light on their enigmatic past. Long before the Huns galloped across the European steppe, their ancestors, the Xiongnu, carved their legacy on the windswept plains of ancient Central Asia. These fierce nomads were not just warriors, they were architects of a formidable confederation that challenged one of history's most powerful empires, the Han dynasty of China. The Xiongnu emerged around the 3rd century BC, their power rooted in the vast Mongolian steppe. They were a nomadic confederation, uniting various tribes under a single leader known as the Chanyu. Their society revolved around the horse, a symbol of status, a tool for survival, and an unparalleled weapon of war. As always, we will turn to prominent modern historians and their works to substantiate our claims with scientific evidence. Nicola di Cosmo is an eminent historian and sinologist specializing in the history of Inner Asia and the relationship between nomadic peoples and ancient China. In his book, Ancient China and Its Enemies, He describes the Xiongnu as the earliest and most enduring nomadic empire of Inner Asia, emphasizing their innovative ability to consolidate power across disparate tribes. The Xiongnu's rise to power brought them into direct conflict with the Han dynasty. From 133 BC onward, these clashes became one of the longest and most grueling military confrontations in ancient history. The Han emperors viewed the Xiongnu as a constant threat to their borders and trade routes. In a calculated move, the Han sought to ambush the Xiongnu at Mai in 133 BC. However, the Xiongnu, led by their Chanyu, outmaneuvered the Han forces, retreating to the steppe just in time to avoid being ambushed. Demonstrating their superior mobility and strategy, this set the tone for centuries of intermittent warfare. Mark Edward Lewis is a renowned scholar of Chinese history, particularly the Qin and Han dynasties. Since 2002, he has been professor in Chinese culture at Stanford University. In his book, The Early Chinese Empires, Qin and Han, he notes that the Xiongnu's dominance of the steppe and their ability to threaten the Han was not just a matter of military strength, but also of their political and social cohesion. Unlike sedentary civilizations, the Xiongnu relied on a fluid, mobile society. Their empire was built on alliances, maintained through shared kinship and warfare. The Chanyu ruled with the support of tribal leaders, enforcing unity in the face of external threats. De Cosmo describes the Xiongnu's social organization as a blend of hierarchy and flexibility, allowing them to mobilize large armies swiftly while maintaining tribal autonomy. The Han responded to the Xiongnu threat with both military and diplomatic strategies. Emperor Wu of Han initiated a series of offensives known as the Han-Xiongnu Wars, while also fortifying the Great Wall to protect China's northern borders. Under the leadership of generals like Wei Qing and Huo Kubing, the Han launched relentless campaigns into Xiongnu territory. These offensives forced the Xiongnu into retreat, fracturing their unity and pushing them further west. Thomas Barfield, a leading anthropologist and historian known for his work on Inner Asian nomads and their interactions with neighboring civilizations, argues that the Han-Xiongnu Wars fundamentally altered the balance of power in Inner Asia, forcing nomadic groups to disperse or adapt. By the 1st century AD, the Xiongnu Confederation began to crumble. Internal divisions, coupled with relentless Han pressure, splintered the once mighty empire. Some Xiongnu groups submitted to Han rule, while others migrated westward, sowing the seeds of future nomadic confederations. In 51 AD, the southern Xiongnu officially submitted to the Han, marking the end of their dominance in Mongolia. Meanwhile, their northern counterparts disappeared into the annals of history, possibly migrating toward Europe. Yunjin Kim is a historian specializing in the history of nomadic empires, particularly the Xiongnu and the Huns, and their roles in shaping Eurasian history. In his book, The Huns, Rome, and the Birth of Europe, he suggests that the Huns may represent a Western splinter of the Xiongnu, adapting their steppe traditions to the new geopolitical realities of Europe. The Xiongnu were more than just warriors. They were a civilization that forced the Han to adapt, innovate, and expand. Their legacy can be seen not only in the ruins of the Great Wall, but also in the echoes of nomadic empires that followed, from the Huns to the Mongols. Barfield concludes, the Xiongnu's legacy lies in their pioneering model of steppe empire building, which would inspire and inform future nomadic powers. So now let's try to connect Xiongnu to the Huns to better understand the origins of the Huns. Chinese and Roman sources describe remarkably similar characteristics in the Xiongnu and Huns. Both were skilled horsemen, relied on mounted archery, and utilized fluid tribal alliances to build their empires. Hyun Kim asserts that the Huns may represent a continuation or transformation of Xiongnu traditions as they moved westward, adapting to new regions and political environments. Following their defeat by the Han dynasty in the 1st century AD, many Xiongnu tribes were displaced, with some heading south toward China and others heading west across Central Asia. This westward migration likely influenced or integrated with other steppe nomads, eventually leading to the emergence of the Huns by the late 4th century AD. Thomas Barfield, in his book The Perilous Frontier, emphasizes that the collapse of the Xiongnu Confederation created a domino effect, causing population movements that transformed the steppe. Both the Xiongnu and the Huns built multi-ethnic confederations of nomadic and semi-nomadic peoples, relying on charismatic leadership and military prowess to maintain cohesion. Nicola Di Cosmo highlights the Xiongnu's sophisticated political organization, which likely influenced successor nomadic groups like the Huns. There are a lot of similarities in the field of warfare. The Huns' use of mounted archers and swift mobile warfare mirrors Xiongnu tactics described in Chinese texts. The ability to strike quickly and retreat into the steppe was a hallmark of both groups. These tactics would later devastate the Roman frontier, just as they had challenged the Han dynasty. Similarities in burial practices, such as elaborate horse sacrifices and nomadic-style graves, have been found in Xiongnu and early Hun archaeological sites. Shared motifs in metalwork and weaponry suggest cultural transmission across the steppe. Recent genetic research has revealed links between populations associated with the Xiongnu and the Huns. A 2020 study of ancient DNA from Hun burials in Europe found genetic markers similar to those of Central Asian populations historically tied to the Xiongnu. This supports Hyun Kim's argument that the Huns may have been a mixed group that included descendants of the Xiongnu along with other Central Asian tribes. There is also some scattered linguistic evidence. The Xiongnu's language is poorly understood, but some scholars believe it may have belonged to a Turkic, Mongolic, or Yeniseian language family. The Huns, similarly, left few linguistic traces, but names and terms associated with them suggest connections to Central Asian languages. While inconclusive, these linguistic fragments hint at a shared cultural and linguistic heritage. As the Xiongnu moved westward and integrated with other nomadic tribes, their identity likely evolved. By the time they reached Europe, they had adapted to new environments and acquired new cultural traits. Mark Edward Lewis notes that nomadic groups often absorbed influences from the sedentary civilizations they encountered, which could explain the Huns' transformation. Both the Xiongnu and the Huns served as symbols of the barbarian threat to great empires. Their shared legacy underscores the enduring power of steppe nomads in shaping world history. While the connection between the Xiongnu and the Huns cannot be proven with absolute certainty, the evidence points to a likely historical continuum. The Xiongnu's westward migration, combined with their cultural, military, and genetic influence, suggests that the Huns may have inherited and adapted Xiongnu traditions, reshaping them for a new stage in history. As Hyun Kim states, the Huns are best understood as the heirs to the Xiongnu legacy, adapting it for their dramatic confrontation with the Roman world. The early encounters between the Huns and the Roman Empire in the late 4th century AD marked the beginning of one of the most transformative periods in European history. These interactions were not merely military engagements, but represented a profound clash of civilizations. The Huns, with their nomadic lifestyle and dynamic military strategies, challenged the structured, urbanized world of Rome. Their arrival disrupted the fragile balance of power along Rome's borders, setting in motion events that would reshape the late ancient world. The Huns' westward migration, beginning in the late 4th century AD, created a seismic shift in the power dynamics of the European steppe and beyond. Moving from the Pontic-Caspian steppes into Europe, they displaced the Alans, the Ostrogoths, and later the Visigoths. These displaced groups, in turn, pressed against the Roman frontiers, triggering a domino effect of migrations and conflicts, which culminated in infamous Battle of Adrianople in 378 AD. Peter Heather is a prominent historian and academic, specializing in the history of late antiquity and the early medieval period. In his book, The Fall of the Roman Empire, 2005, vividly describes this phenomenon. The arrival of the Huns injected a new level of volatility into the barbarian world, forcing migrations on a scale not seen before. Heather emphasizes that this chain reaction fundamentally altered the geopolitics of the late Roman world, with tribes previously held in check now flooding Roman territories. Walter Goffart, another great historian from universities Yale and Toronto, writes in his book Barbarians and Romans AD 418 to 584 that the Huns' displacement of Gothic tribes directly contributed to the collapse of long-standing buffer zones along the Roman frontier. This collapse created vulnerabilities that Rome was ill-equipped to address. The Huns' first documented interactions with Rome occurred when they crossed the Danube around 376 AD. Their presence indirectly forced different Gothic tribes to seek asylum within Roman borders. This influx of Gothic refugees escalated tensions, culminating in the catastrophic Gothic War from 376 to 382 AD and the Roman defeat at Adrianople in 378 AD. The Battle of Adrianople not only marked a turning point in Roman military history, but also highlighted the indirect yet profound influence of the Huns. Historian Adrian Goldsworthy is a distinguished historian and author specializing in Roman history and military strategy. Born in 1969 in Wales, Goldsworthy studied ancient and modern history at St John's College, Oxford, where he earned his doctorate focusing on Roman military history. His academic foundation has informed his prolific career as a writer and historian. In his book, How Rome Fell, Death of a Superpower from 2009, he notes, while the Huns themselves were not directly involved in Adrianople, their displacement of the Goths created a crisis that revealed the Roman Empire's fragility. Goldsworthy identifies this period as the beginning of a long unraveling of Roman military dominance in the West. The Huns' direct incursions into Roman territories began in 395 AD, targeting the Eastern Roman Empire. Exploiting internal divisions and a weakened defense system, they launched raids into Thrace, Cappadocia, and Armenia. These swift, devastating attacks were characterized by hit-and-run tactics that overwhelmed Roman forces. The historian Ammianus Marcellinus provides one of the earliest Roman descriptions of the Huns. They are a savage race, born to war and molded for destruction, subsisting on roots and uncooked meat. Hyunjin Kim interprets these raids as a calculated strategy by the Huns to test Roman defenses while securing valuable plunder and tribute. Kim argues that the Huns' tactics reflected their nomadic heritage, emphasizing mobility, surprise, and psychological warfare. By the early 5th century AD, the Huns had established a complex relationship with the Roman Empire. While they were feared raiders, they also served as valuable mercenaries. Roman generals employed Hunnic warriors to combat other barbarian groups, leveraging their unparalleled expertise in mounted warfare. Hunnic mercenaries were notably present in the Roman campaigns against the Visigoths and Vandals. Edward James is a distinguished British scholar specializing in medieval history and science fiction studies. He holds the title of Emeritus Professor of Medieval History at University College Dublin. In his book Europe's Barbarians, AD 200 to 600 from 2009, he notes, The Huns were pragmatic in their dealings with Rome, offering their services as mercenaries in exchange for wealth and political recognition. This dual role as both allies and adversaries highlighted the Huns' adaptability and their ability to exploit the geopolitical realities of the late Roman world. The Huns' presence on the Roman frontiers had profound economic and strategic consequences. The cost of defending against Hunnic raids drained Roman resources, while payments of gold as tribute further destabilized the empire's finances. Guy Halsall writes in his book Barbarian Migrations in the Roman West, 376 to 568, that the Huns' demand for tribute was not just a means of enrichment, but a deliberate strategy to weaken the empire economically. Additionally, the Huns' disruption of trade routes and agricultural production in the Balkans exacerbated internal Roman crises. These pressures forced the Eastern Roman Empire to divert resources away from other critical fronts, weakening its overall strategic position. Roman writers portrayed the Huns in starkly negative terms, emphasizing their perceived savagery and inhumanity. However, these accounts must be understood in the context of Roman ethnocentrism and propaganda. Christopher Kelly is a British-Australian classicist and historian specializing in the later Roman Empire and the classical tradition. In his book, The End of Empire, Attila the Hun and the Fall of Rome from 2009, he argues that Roman depictions of the Huns were often exaggerated to justify their own failures and to rally internal support against an external enemy. While Roman elites viewed the Huns as barbaric outsiders, they also recognized their military prowess. Emperor Theodosius I negotiated treaties with the Huns to secure peace, demonstrating a grudging acknowledgement of their power. Modern historians continue to debate the Huns' role in this transformative period. Walter Pohl, prominent Austrian historian in his book The Avars, a steppe empire in Central Europe, 567 to 822 from 2018, highlights the Huns' influence as precursors to later steppe empires, such as the Avars and Mongols. Pohl emphasizes their ability to integrate diverse groups into a cohesive confederation, which allowed them to challenge the most powerful empires of their time. Conversely, E. Thompson, in his work The Huns, presents a more traditional view, characterizing the Huns as primarily destructive forces whose actions accelerated Rome's decline. Thompson's work, while influential, has been critiqued for its reliance on Roman sources and its lack of consideration for recent archaeological and genetic evidence. The early encounters between the Huns and Rome were a prelude to the dramatic rise of Attila, who would redefine the Huns' relationship with the Roman Empire. These initial interactions revealed both the vulnerabilities of Rome and the adaptability of the Huns. As the Huns transitioned from opportunistic raiders to strategic players in Roman politics, they laid the groundwork for the seismic shifts that would define the 5th century AD. Attila's rise to power was shaped by a complex interplay of familial ties, political dynamics, and the traditions of nomadic leadership. Born into the ruling family of the Huns, Attila was likely groomed from a young age to lead, learning the arts of warfare, diplomacy, and governance that defined his people's approach to power. However, his ascent was not a solitary journey. Attila initially shared power with his elder brother, Bleda, a partnership that reflected the Hunnic practice of dividing authority among prominent family members to ensure unity and stability within their vast and diverse confederation. The Huns, like many nomadic groups, relied on a coalition of tribes united under charismatic leaders. The supreme ruler, or Khan, governed with the support of subordinate leaders who managed different tribal factions. This structure required careful balancing, as internal dissent could easily fracture their unity. Attila and Bleda inherited the leadership mantle around 434 AD after the death of their uncle, Rugila or Rua, who had consolidated Hunnic power and expanded their influence across the Danube frontier. Peter Heather, in his book The Fall of the Roman Empire, emphasizes the importance of familial co-leadership in the Hunnic political system. The joint rule of Attila and Bleda illustrates the practical necessity of cooperation within the Hunnic elite, where shared power was both a political necessity and a means of maintaining unity among the fractious tribes. As co-rulers, Attila and Bleda oversaw the Huns at the height of their territorial expansion. Together, they continued Rugila's policies of asserting dominance over the Eastern Roman Empire through a combination of diplomacy and warfare. Their first significant act as leaders came in 435 AD, when they negotiated the Treaty of Margus with the Eastern Roman Empire. This treaty, signed near the Roman settlement of Margus, modern-day Požarevac in Serbia, was a landmark agreement that secured peace in exchange for substantial tribute payments from the Romans. The terms of the treaty required the Romans to pay an annual sum of 700 pounds of gold, a staggering amount that underscored the Huns' growing influence. Christopher Kelly, in The End of Empire, Attila the Hun, and the Fall of Rome, describes this phase as one of strategic consolidation. The Treaty of Margus was a masterstroke, demonstrating Attila and Bleda's ability to wield diplomacy as effectively as they wielded their cavalry. It marked the beginning of a new phase in Hunnic-Roman relations, where the Huns dictated terms and Rome scrambled to comply. While the treaty brought temporary peace, it also revealed cracks in the Roman Empire's defences and finances, setting the stage for future conflicts. The partnership between Attila and Bleda was marked by both collaboration and underlying tension, a common feature of dual leadership in nomadic societies. While the sources are silent on the precise dynamics of their relationship, it is likely that Attila and Bleda shared power uneasily, each vying for influence within the Hunnic Confederation. Guy Halsall notes, the co-rule of Attila and Bleda, though outwardly cooperative, was inherently unstable. Such arrangements often sowed seeds of rivalry, as both leaders sought to consolidate their personal authority while managing the competing demands of their tribal allies. Attila's eventual sole leadership suggests that these tensions reached a breaking point. In 445 AD, Bleda reportedly died under mysterious circumstances. While some accounts suggest that Bleda died in battle, others imply that Attila orchestrated his brother's assassination to seize full control of the Hunnic Confederation. Jordanes, writing in the 6th century, attributes Bleda's death directly to Attila, though the veracity of this claim remains uncertain. With Bleda's death, Attila emerged as the unchallenged leader of the Huns. This transition marked a turning point in Hunnic history. Attila's consolidation of power allowed him to centralize authority and embark on a series of aggressive campaigns that would define his legacy. Free from the constraints of co-leadership, he pursued a bold vision for Hunnic expansion, leveraging both his military prowess and his reputation as a fearsome and ambitious leader. Christopher Kelly provides insight into this transformation. The death of Bleda, whether natural or orchestrated, cleared the path for Attila to impose his singular vision on the Hunnic Confederation. Under his sole rule, the Huns transitioned from opportunistic raiders to a formidable geopolitical force that could challenge the might of Rome. Attila's rise to sole leadership coincided with a shift in Hunnic strategy. No longer content with merely extracting tribute from the Eastern Roman Empire, he began to project power across a broader arena, targeting both Eastern and Western Rome and cementing his place in history as one of the most feared and influential leaders of the ancient world. Attila's campaigns against the Eastern Roman Empire were a defining moment in his leadership and showcased the Huns' ability to adapt and exploit the vulnerabilities of one of the world's most powerful empires. These campaigns, beginning in 441 AD, were a calculated response to perceived Roman provocations and a demonstration of the Huns' growing military and political ambitions. The Huns had long maintained a complex relationship with the Eastern Roman Empire, oscillating between alliance and hostility. The Treaty of Margus in 435 AD, negotiated by Attila and Bleda, had established a fragile peace, with the Romans agreeing to pay substantial annual tribute. However, tensions simmered beneath the surface. The Eastern Roman Empire, under Emperor Theodosius II, struggled to maintain its commitments to the treaty due to internal instability, financial strain, and distractions from other fronts, including conflicts with the Vandals in North Africa. Christopher Kelly, in The End of Empire, Attila the Hun, and the Fall of Rome, observes, the Eastern Roman Empire's inability to honor its agreements with the Huns was not merely a failure of diplomacy, it was a symptom of a larger systemic decline, which leaders like Attila were quick to exploit. The immediate trigger for renewed hostilities was a combination of Roman arrears on tribute payments and allegations that Roman officials had desecrated a Hunnic burial site near Margus. These provocations provided Attila with both a pretext for war and an opportunity to demonstrate his military dominance. In 441 AD, Attila and Bleda launched a devastating campaign against the Eastern Roman Empire, targeting the Balkan provinces. The Huns crossed the Danube with a swift and disciplined force, laying waste to key cities such as Margus, Singidunum, modern-day Belgrade, and Viminacium. These attacks were characterized by their speed and ferocity, leaving little time for Roman defenses to mount an effective response. Peter Heather emphasizes the significance of these early raids. The Huns' ability to strike deep into Roman territory with minimal resistance revealed the fragility of the Eastern Empire's frontier defenses. It was a chilling reminder of the empire's vulnerability to external threats. The Romans, caught off guard by the Huns' mobility and tactical ingenuity, were forced to sue for peace. This culminated in a temporary truce in 442 AD, during which the Eastern Empire agreed to increase its annual tribute to £1,400 of gold, a staggering concession that underscored the Huns' leverage. Despite the truce, tensions remained unresolved, and in 447 AD, Attila resumed his offensive against the Eastern Roman Empire. By this time, Bleda was dead, and Attila was the sole ruler of the Huns, free to execute his vision without constraint. This campaign was even more ambitious than the first, targeting major urban centers and inflicting catastrophic damage on Roman infrastructure. The Huns advanced through Moesia and Thrace, devastating over 70 cities, including Serdica, modern Sofia, and Philippopolis, modern Plovdiv. Their tactics combined psychological warfare with brutal efficiency, creating a climate of terror that paralyzed Roman resistance. Attila's forces reached the very outskirts of Constantinople, striking fear into the heart of the imperial court. Guy Halsall highlights the scale of destruction. The 447 campaign was not merely a series of raids, but a concerted effort to dismantle the Eastern Roman Empire's ability to resist. The devastation of urban centers and key supply lines created a long-lasting impact on the region's economic and social fabric. The Roman response was hampered by a devastating earthquake that had struck Constantinople earlier that year, weakening the city's defenses. Emperor Theodosius II, unable to mount an effective counteroffensive, was forced to negotiate once again. The resulting treaty, brokered in 448 AD, imposed even harsher terms on the Eastern Empire, including a one-time payment of £6,000 of gold and an increased annual tribute. Attila's campaigns against the Eastern Roman Empire were a masterclass in strategic opportunism. He exploited the empire's internal divisions, financial woes, and overstretched military resources to maximum effect. His use of mobile cavalry and siege tactics allowed the Huns to penetrate deep into Roman territory, bypassing fortified positions and targeting economically vital regions. Christopher Kelly observes, Attila's genius lay not only in his military prowess, but also in his ability to manipulate the political and economic vulnerabilities of his adversaries. The Eastern Roman Empire's reliance on tribute payments to secure peace was a double-edged sword that ultimately weakened its ability to resist future incursions. The tribute payments extracted by Attila placed a significant strain on the Eastern Empire's economy, diverting resources from other critical areas such as defense and public works. This economic pressure, combined with the psychological impact of repeated Hunnic invasions, contributed to the erosion of the Eastern Empire's stability. The campaigns against the Eastern Roman Empire solidified Attila's reputation as a fearsome and formidable leader. They demonstrated the Huns' ability to challenge one of the most powerful empires of the ancient world and set the stage for Attila's later campaigns in the West. The Eastern Empire's concessions to Attila underscored the shifting balance of power in late antiquity, where traditional notions of Roman superiority were increasingly challenged by the ascendancy of barbarian groups. As Peter Heather concludes, Attila's Eastern campaigns were not merely a military triumph, they were a symbol of the Huns' transformation from opportunistic raiders to a geopolitical force capable of reshaping the destiny of empires. The Eastern Roman Empire survived Attila's onslaught, but the scars of these campaigns would linger, serving as a stark reminder of the Huns' dominance during their apex of power. The invasion of Gaul in 451 AD was one of Attila the Hun most ambitious military campaigns, a bold move that highlighted his strategic vision and the reach of Hunnic power at its apex. This campaign was not just a test of military might, but also a political maneuver designed to exploit divisions within the Roman Empire and its allies. Attila's decision to invade Gaul was motivated by a complex interplay of personal ambition, political opportunity, and strategic considerations. By 450 AD, Attila had consolidated his power over a vast Hunnic empire, commanding a coalition of subjugated tribes and allied groups across Central and Eastern Europe. His earlier campaigns against the Eastern Roman Empire had secured immense tribute, but his ambitions now turned westward. One key catalyst for the invasion was the infamous plea for help from Honoria, the sister of Western Roman Emperor Valentinian III. Seeking to escape a forced marriage, Honoria sent a letter to Attila along with her ring, reportedly offering her hand in marriage. Attila interpreted this as a formal proposal and claimed half of the Western Roman Empire as his dowry. While Valentinian III dismissed the claim as preposterous, Attila used it as a pretext for his campaign. Christopher Kelly emphasizes, Attila's invocation of Honoria's letter was a masterstroke of propaganda. It provided a veneer of legitimacy to what was, in reality, a calculated move to destabilize and dominate the Western Roman Empire. Another driving factor was the fractious political landscape in Gaul. The Visigoths, led by King Theodoric I, maintained a tenuous alliance with Rome, but had their own ambitions for regional dominance. The Franks, Burgundians, and other barbarian groups in the region were similarly divided, offering Attila an opportunity to exploit these rivalries. In early 451 AD, Attila crossed the Rhine River with a massive army, estimated by some ancient sources to number in the hundreds of thousands. While these figures are likely exaggerated, modern historians agree that the Hunnic force was substantial, composed not only of Huns, but also of subjugated or allied groups, including Ostrogoths, Gepids, and Alans. This coalition reflected Attila's ability to unify diverse peoples under his command through both coercion and charisma. Peter Heather, in his book The Fall of the Roman Empire, notes the sheer scale and diversity of Attila's forces underscored his unparalleled ability to mobilize manpower from across the steppe and beyond, creating a military juggernaut that few could resist. Attila's army swept through northern Gaul with devastating speed, targeting key cities and settlements along the way. The city of Metz was sacked and burned, with its population massacred. Other cities, including Reims and Troy, reportedly fell to the advancing Huns, spreading fear throughout the region. A critical moment in the invasion was the siege of Aurelianum, modern-day Orleans. Attila targeted the city for its strategic location on the Loire River, a vital artery for communication and supply lines. According to sources, the Huns encircled the city, employing their signature siege tactics, which combined intimidation, mobility, and relentless assaults. The city's defense was led by its bishop, Annianus, who played a pivotal role in rallying the population. Ancient accounts describe him as a figure of divine inspiration, urging the citizens to hold out until reinforcements arrived. The Roman general Flavius Aetius, commanding a coalition of Roman and Visigothic forces, was marching to relieve the city. Guy Halsall, in his monumental work Barbarian Migrations and the Roman West, 376 to 568, highlights the significance of the siege. The siege of Orléans was not merely a tactical engagement, but a symbolic clash between the old Roman order and the rising power of the Huns. Its outcome would determine the fate of Gaul and the trajectory of Attila's campaign. As Aetius and his forces approached, Attila reportedly ordered a hasty withdrawal, avoiding a direct confrontation until he could choose a more advantageous battlefield. This strategic retreat demonstrated Attila's pragmatism and his understanding of the risks of overextending his forces. Throughout the invasion, Attila exhibited his hallmark strategic acumen. His campaigns were not just military ventures, but psychological operations aimed at instilling terror in his enemies. By targeting cities of symbolic and strategic importance, he undermined the morale of his adversaries and demonstrated the vulnerability of Roman defences. Edward James, in his book Europe's Barbarians, AD 200 to 600, observes Attila's genius lay in his ability to combine traditional steppe warfare with the siege tactics and logistical planning required to confront settled civilizations. His campaigns in Gaul exemplified this hybrid approach. Attila's ability to adapt his tactics to the challenges of Western Europe, where fortified cities and dense populations posed different obstacles compared to the open steppe, was a testament to his leadership. His use of diverse forces, each contributing unique skills and strengths, further amplified his effectiveness. While the invasion of Gaul ultimately culminated in the famous Battle of the Catalonian Plains, its broader significance lay in the disruption it caused to the Western Roman Empire and its allies. The campaign revealed the fractured nature of Roman authority and the growing power of barbarian groups within its borders. It also highlighted the limits of Attila's ambitions, as his failure to decisively subjugate Gaul marked a turning point in his Western campaigns. Christopher Kelly summarizes the invasion's impact. The invasion of Gaul was a microcosm of the larger forces at play in late antiquity. The decline of Roman power, the rise of barbarian kingdoms, and the transformative influence of leaders like Attila, who redefined the boundaries of empire and barbarism. Attila's invasion of Gaul remains a pivotal chapter in the history of late antiquity, illustrating the complex interplay of politics, warfare, and leadership that shaped the era. While his ambitions in Gaul were ultimately thwarted, the campaign cemented his legacy as one of history's most formidable and enigmatic leaders. As Attila's forces withdrew from the siege of Orléans, the stage was set for one of the most consequential confrontations in European history. The Roman Visigothic coalition, led by Aetius and Theodoric, pursued the Hunnic army, determined to halt Attila's advance and defend the heart of Gaul. For Attila, this was no mere retreat, it was a calculated move to draw his enemies into a climactic battle on terrain of his choosing. The two greatest powers of the era, the Roman world and the Hunnic confederation, would now clash in a decisive encounter that would determine the future of Gaul and perhaps the fate of Western civilization itself. The Battle of the Catalonian Plains was about to unfold, a confrontation marked by immense stakes, unprecedented alliances, and the unmatched ferocity of Attila the Hun. The Battle of the Catalonian Plains, fought in 451 AD, remains one of the most significant and fiercely debated engagements of late antiquity. It was not merely a clash of armies, but a struggle between two vastly different worlds: the nomadic warriors of Attila's Hunnic confederation and the fractured remnants of Roman power, bolstered by Germanic allies. This battle marked a decisive turning point in the history of the Roman West, illustrating the fragility of its alliances and the enduring power of steppe nomads. Edward James, in Europe's Barbarians, AD 200 to 600, notes, "The coalition against Attila was an alliance born of necessity, a temporary truce between old rivals united by the existential threat posed by the Huns." Theodoric's Visigoths and Aetius's Roman forces, supplemented by Franks and Burgundians, pursued Attila and intercepted his forces near modern-day Troyes. Both sides understood the stakes. Victory for Attila would cement his domination of Gaul, while defeat could spell the end of his western ambitions. The Catalonian Plains offered a vast, open terrain ideal for Attila's mobile cavalry. However, the battlefield also featured a crucial hill in the centre, which became the focal point of the initial engagement. Attila sought to seize this high ground, recognizing its tactical importance. His forces launched a ferocious assault, but the Roman Visigothic coalition secured the position after intense fighting. Jordanes, a 6th century Gothic historian, provides a vivid description of the battle. The Huns, in their savage frenzy, threw themselves against the Roman lines like waves crashing upon a rock, their arrows darkening the sky. The clash of swords and the cries of the dying echoed across the plains. The battle raged throughout the day, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. The Visigothic king Theodoric was killed during the fighting, reportedly trampled by his own men or struck down by an Ostrogothic warrior in Attila's service. Despite this devastating loss, the Visigoths held their ground, with Theodoric's son Thorismund rallying his troops to continue the fight. Christopher Kelly observes, "The death of Theodoric was a blow to the coalition, but it also galvanized the Visigoths. Their determination to avenge their fallen king became a decisive factor in the battle's outcome." Attila's forces, meanwhile, began to falter under the sustained pressure of the coalition's counterattacks. By nightfall, the Huns retreated to their camp, which they fortified with wagons. According to Jordanes, Attila prepared for the worst, amassing a funeral pyre of wooden saddles in his camp, intending to immolate himself rather than face capture. The battle ended inconclusively, with neither side achieving a decisive victory. However, the Roman Visigothic coalition succeeded in halting Attila's advance, forcing him to withdraw from Gaul. Estimates of casualties vary widely, with some sources suggesting tens of thousands dead on both sides, highlighting the immense scale and brutality of the conflict. Modern historians have debated the true significance of the battle. Guy Halsall, in Barbarian Migrations and the Roman West, 376 to 568, argues, "The Battle of the Catalonian Plains was not the death knell of the Huns, but a demonstration of the precarious balance of power in late Roman Gaul. It was less a triumph for Rome than a testament to the importance of alliances in the face of overwhelming threats." Peter Heather adds, while the battle checked Attila's ambitions in Gaul, it also underscored the fragility of Rome's defences. The empire's reliance on Germanic allies like the Visigoths revealed its inability to confront threats independently. Jordanes's portrayal of the battle as a momentous victory for civilization over barbarism reflects the Roman perspective, but must be tempered with modern analysis. Attila's withdrawal was strategic, preserving his core forces for future campaigns, including his invasion of Italy the following year. The Battle of the Catalonian Plains remains a symbol of resistance against a seemingly unstoppable force. It highlighted Attila's ability to command a diverse and formidable confederation, as well as the resilience of Rome and its allies in the face of existential threats. Christopher Kelly concludes, Attila's retreat was not a defeat in the conventional sense, but a reminder of his adaptability and the limitations of Rome's military capacity. Battle was a fleeting reprieve in a larger struggle for survival. This engagement, often mythologized, serves as a microcosm of the complex dynamics of late antiquity, a world where alliances were fragile, loyalties were fluid, and the fate of empires hung by a thread. By the early 450s AD, Attila had firmly established himself as the dominant force in Europe, his campaigns striking fear across the Roman Empire. Following the devastating invasion of Gaul, Attila turned his attention southward, targeting the heartland of the Western Roman Empire, Italy. In 452 AD, he launched a campaign into northern Italy, a region teeming with Roman wealth and strategic significance. Attila's initial assault fell upon Aquileia, one of the most prosperous and heavily fortified cities in northern Italy. Historical accounts describe a protracted siege that tested both the Huns' resilience and their siegecraft. Despite Aquileia's formidable defences, Attila's forces eventually breached the city. Jordanes, in the Origins and Deeds of the Goths, writes that the Huns left Aquileia a smouldering ruin, its survivors fleeing to the islands of the Venetian lagoon, an event traditionally associated with the founding of Venice. After the fall of Aquileia, Attila's army marched south, leaving devastation in its wake. Cities such as Padua, Verona, and Milan reportedly fell victim to his wrath. The psychological impact of these attacks was profound. Contemporary Roman writers describe northern Italy as a desolate wasteland, its population in flight. Edward James, in Europe's Barbarians AD 200 to 600, notes that Attila's march into Italy was as much a campaign of terror as of conquest, designed to unnerve the Western Roman Empire's already fragile administration. Despite initial successes, Attila's campaign into Italy began to falter. Famine gripped the region, exacerbated by the Huns' scorched earth tactics, which left little for even their own troops to consume. Additionally, reports of disease spreading through the Hunnic camp, likely malaria or dysentery, further weakened their forces. Adrian Goldsworthy, in The Fall of the West, The Death of the Roman Superpower, highlights this logistical collapse, stating, Attila's inability to sustain his campaign in Italy reflected the inherent limitations of a nomadic army operating deep in enemy territory. It is significant to note that the Western Roman Empire under Emperor Valentinian III was in no position to mount a serious military counter-offensive. The empire relied instead on diplomacy and religious authority to stem the Hunnic tide. In the summer of 452 AD, as Attila's forces approached Rome, a delegation led by Pope Leo I was dispatched to meet the Hunnic leader. This meeting, one of the most iconic moments of late antiquity, took place near the river Mincio in northern Italy. The details of their interaction remain shrouded in mystery, with sources offering varying accounts. According to Prosper of Aquitaine, a contemporary chronicler, Pope Leo approached Attila not with threats, but with appeals to reason and divine intervention. The exact words exchanged are unknown, but Prosper emphasizes the Pope's dignified bearing and persuasive rhetoric. Christopher Kelly, in The End of Empire, Attila the Hun and the Fall of Rome, posits that Leo's authority as the spiritual leader of the Christian world presented a moral counterweight to Attila's might, an appeal that even the scourge of God could not dismiss. Medieval legend, amplified in later Christian narratives, suggests that a vision of Saints Peter and Paul appeared to Attila during this meeting, threatening divine retribution should he proceed to sack Rome. While such accounts are likely apocryphal, they underscore the enduring symbolic power of this encounter. The reasons for Attila's withdrawal from Italy remain a subject of historical debate. Several factors likely converged to influence his decision. It is plausible that Pope Leo, along with other Roman envoys, offered Attila a substantial payment of gold in exchange for peace. As Christopher Kelly notes, Attila had long used diplomacy as a means to extract wealth from his adversaries. His retreat from Italy may have been less about divine intervention and more about practical negotiation. Another reason for withdrawal could be logistical strain. The combination of famine, disease, and depleted resources had rendered further operations in Italy untenable. Adrian Goldsworthy asserts the Hunnic withdrawal was as much a consequence of overreach as of Roman diplomacy. Some reports also suggest that the Eastern Roman Empire was mobilizing against Attila, potentially threatening his rear flank. Guy Halsall, in Barbarian Migrations and the Roman West, observes Attila's strategic calculus was always multifaceted. His decision to leave Italy may have been influenced by events unfolding far beyond the Italian peninsula. Attila's campaign, despite its abrupt end, had already achieved its primary objective, demonstrating the vulnerability of the Western Roman Empire and solidifying his reputation as an unstoppable force. The encounter between Pope Leo I and Attila became a defining moment in the history of the papacy, symbolizing the Church's moral authority in the face of barbarian violence. For the Huns, however, it marked the zenith of their European campaigns. Within a year of their retreat from Italy, Attila would die under mysterious circumstances, leaving his empire to fragment in the absence of his unifying leadership. The Italian campaign, culminating in the fateful meeting with Pope Leo, demonstrated the fragility of the Roman West and the strategic genius of Attila. Yet it also revealed the limits of even the most fearsome nomadic empire, foreshadowing the eventual decline of Hunnic dominance in Europe. The death of Attila in 453 AD remains one of history's enduring enigmas, shrouded in both mystery and myth. According to the 6th century Gothic historian Jordanes, Attila died on his wedding night after marrying a young woman named Ildiko. The account suggests that Attila suffered a massive nosebleed, choking on his own blood while heavily intoxicated. Jordanes poetically describes his death as one befitting a man who had terrorized empires, not by the hand of man, but by the will of God. Modern historians have debated the plausibility of this narrative. Christopher Kelly notes that while a fatal nosebleed cannot be ruled out, alternative explanations, such as poisoning or assassination, are equally possible. He writes, "Given the political instability surrounding Hunnic succession, foul play orchestrated by internal rivals cannot be discounted." Edward James supports the possibility of an internal conspiracy, emphasizing the fragile nature of Attila's rule over a multi-ethnic confederation. Attila's death, James argues, may have been the result of intrigue within his own court, as his dominance likely stifled ambitions that erupted upon his passing. The sudden loss of Attila left the Hunnic Empire in a precarious position. as was often the case with nomadic confederations, their unity was heavily dependent on the charisma and military success of a single leader. Attila's sons, led by Alaric, attempted to maintain their father's legacy, but their inability to command the loyalty of the diverse tribal groups within the Hunnic Confederation proved catastrophic. The unraveling of Hunnic dominance culminated in the Battle of Nidau in 454 AD, where the subject tribes, led by the Gepids under King Alaric, rose in rebellion. The Huns suffered a decisive defeat, marking the beginning of their decline as a dominant force in Europe. Guy Halsall highlights the significance of this battle. The defeat at Nidau symbolized the end of Hunnic hegemony and the reassertion of independence by the very groups Attila had once subjugated. After Nidau, the Huns fragmented into smaller groups, many of which faded from the historical record. Some Hunnic remnants assimilated into the societies of the Germanic tribes they had once dominated, while others retreated to the Eurasian steppe. The collapse of the Huns as a unified power marked a significant turning point in the late ancient world, reshaping the political landscape of Europe. Attila's death signaled not just the end of Hunnic dominance, but also the passing of an era. The Huns had served as a catalyst for seismic changes in late antiquity, accelerating the decline of the Roman Empire and reshaping the dynamics of power in Europe. Their unique form of warfare, blending speed, mobility, and terror, had exposed the vulnerabilities of Rome's once mighty military machine. Christopher Kelly captures their impact succinctly. The Huns were more than destroyers. They were agents of transformation, forcing the Roman Empire to confront its own fragility and adapt to a rapidly changing world. Yet, the Huns' legacy extends beyond destruction. Their incursions into Europe created the conditions for the emergence of new political entities and cultural exchanges. The migratory movements they triggered brought Germanic tribes into closer contact with Roman civilization, laying the groundwork for the medieval world. As Guy Halsall concludes, the Huns were not the architects of Rome's fall, but their role as a disruptive force cannot be overstated. They were both a product of their environment and a pivotal influence on the course of European history. In the end, Attila's life and death encapsulate the paradox of the Huns, a people at once feared and misunderstood, whose shadow looms large over the history of late antiquity. But this is not the end. More history is waiting for you. This is not just a story. It is the saga and a tale of empires collapsing, kingdoms rising, and the chaos that birthed a new world. And at the center of it all, like a thunderclap in the storm of time, were the Huns and their story as was told today. Imagine the heart of the greatest empire the world has ever seen, ancient Rome falling into chaos. The once unstoppable Roman Empire brought to its knees by two Gothic kings, outsiders who were labeled as barbarians. King Alaric, with the Visigoths, stormed Rome in 410 AD, shocking the entire world. And later, in 476 AD, the final emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was overthrown, marking the true fall of Rome. But what really happened? This isn't just a tale of war and destruction. This is a story of ambition, betrayal, and survival. The rise of the Visigoths, the might of the Ostrogoths, and the end of an era. How did King Alaric tear down the walls of Rome? What fate awaited Odoacer, the man who displaced the last Roman emperor? And why did the Roman Empire collapse so completely under the pressure of the Goths? If you think you know the story of the fall of Rome, think again. In the next few minutes, we'll unravel the truth behind the pivotal moments that changed the course of European history forever. I'll take you deep into the events of 410, when Alaric's armies roamed the streets of Rome. We'll explore what truly happened in 476, when the Roman Empire breathed its last, and how Odoacer sealed his own fate. There will be no fluff, no myths, just total history. Born around 370 AD on Puce Island in the Danube Delta, Alaric was no ordinary child. His people, the Visigoths, had long been on the move, fleeing the relentless pressure of the Huns. The Visigoths were not just warriors, they were a people seeking a homeland, a future. The Visigoths, led by their king Fritigernus, sought asylum within the borders of the Roman Empire. In 376 AD, they were allowed to settle in Thrace as federati, Roman allies, who would provide military service in exchange for land and protection. But the Romans failed to honor their promises. Famine and mistreatment led to unrest, setting the stage for a historic clash between the Goths and Rome. In 378 AD, the tension exploded into open conflict. On August 9th, 378 at Adrianople, Eastern Roman Emperor Valens faced the Visigoths, led by Fritigernus, in a battle that would shake the empire to its core. The Romans, confident in their numbers and power, underestimated the Gothic cavalry. The legions were surrounded, overwhelmed by the sheer ferocity of the Gothic charge. In the chaos, Emperor Valens was killed, and 2/3 of the Roman army was annihilated. For Rome, it was a disaster. For the Visigoths, it was a triumph. The defeat of Valens at Adrianople was catastrophic for Rome, resulting in significant losses. Estimates suggest over 10,000 Roman soldiers died, including Valens himself. This battle marked a turning point for the Goths and solidified their position as a formidable force against Rome. The victory inspired Alaric and other Gothic leaders, fostering ambitions for greater autonomy and territorial control within the empire. This defeat marked a pivotal moment in military history, demonstrating that heavy cavalry could decisively overcome traditional Roman infantry tactics. It signaled a shift in military dominance from Rome to barbarian forces, particularly the Goths. The death of Emperor Valens created a power vacuum in the Eastern Roman Empire. His demise led to instability and necessitated the rise of his successor, Theodosius I, who would later stabilize the empire by negotiating peace with the Goths. Following their victory, the Goths rampaged across the Balkans, pillaging Roman territories and increasing their numbers through defection from enslaved Goths within the empire. This period of unrest laid the groundwork for future invasions and conflicts with other barbarian groups. The defeat at Adrianople exposed significant weaknesses in Roman military organization and strategy. In response, Theodosius I adapted by incorporating more cavalry into his forces and relying on barbarian mercenaries, indicating a shift in military tactics that acknowledged the changing nature of warfare. While the Eastern Roman Empire would continue to exist for over a millennium after Adrianople, this battle is often viewed as a precursor to the eventual decline of the Western Roman Empire. The loss emboldened barbarian groups and set off a chain reaction of invasions that culminated in events like the sack of Rome by Alaric in 410 AD. Despite the bitterness of Adrianople, the Visigoths remained tied to Rome, and Alaric's military prowess did not go unnoticed. He rose to become a trusted leader in the Roman army, serving as a foederati commander under Emperor Theodosius the Great. Theodosius needed the Visigoths to help secure his fractured empire. Alaric fought in Theodosius's campaigns against the Franks, as well as in the battles to reunify the eastern and western halves of the empire. He participated in campaigns against various enemies of Rome, including the usurper Eugenius. Notably, he played a role in the Battle of Frigidus in 394 AD, where he led Gothic troops that helped Emperor Theodosius defeat Eugenius's forces. It was only after that battle that Christianity became the state religion in Rome. After that, Alaric demanded annual payments of gold and grain as well as military recognition within the Roman hierarchy. However, these requests were repeatedly denied by Emperor Honorius and his advisors, leading to increasing frustration among the Goths. The execution of Flavius Stilicho, a powerful general who had been an ally to Alaric in 408 CE, created a power vacuum and intensified anti-barbarian sentiments within Rome. This led to further deterioration of relations between the Visigoths and the Roman authorities. Alaric laid siege to Rome multiple times between 408 and 410 AD. During these sieges, he attempted to negotiate terms with Honorius, but was consistently rebuffed. In 409 CE, Alaric briefly lifted his siege after proclaiming Attalus as a puppet emperor, hoping to leverage this new political situation to gain concessions from Honorius. By 410 AD, after negotiations failed once again, Alaric prepared for a final assault on Rome. On August 24th, he received assistance from sympathizers within the city who opened the Salarian Gate, allowing his forces to enter. Once inside, Alaric and his troops embarked on a 3-day spree of plunder. They looted wealthy homes and public buildings while sparing Christian churches like St. Peter's and St. Paul's. Despite the violence associated with such an event, reports indicate that Alaric's forces treated ordinary citizens relatively humanely compared to later sackings of cities. Historical accounts suggest that Alaric's forces seized vast amounts of treasure during the sack, including gold, silver, silk tunics, and other valuables. The plunder was significant enough that it left an indelible mark on Roman society and symbolized the decline of Roman power. After sacking Rome, Alaric aimed to move southward into North Africa but fell ill and died shortly thereafter in 410 AD. His death led to further migrations of the Visigoths into Gaul and eventually Spain. The sack of Rome had profound implications for the Western Roman Empire. It highlighted the empire's vulnerability and marked a significant shift in power dynamics within Europe. It also inspired future generations regarding themes of moral decay and decline associated with imperial power, as reflected in works like Augustine's City of God. After the sack of Rome, Alaric's journey ended in death, but the Visigoths' story was just beginning. His death led to a power vacuum within the Visigothic leadership, but his successors, particularly Athalf, Alaric's brother-in-law, continued to pursue the goals of establishing a stable kingdom. Athalf sought to solidify Visigothic power by marrying Galla Placidia, the sister of Emperor Honorius, which aimed to create a diplomatic alliance with Rome and regain territories lost to other barbarian groups like the Vandals and Alans. In 418 CE, under King Wallia, the Visigoths were granted land in Gallia Aquitania by Emperor Honorius as federati, allied peoples. This territory served as a base for further expansion into Hispania. The Visigoths gradually consolidated their power, defeating local Roman forces and other barbarian tribes. By around 500 CE, they had established control over much of Hispania and parts of southern Gaul, with their capital at Toulouse. By 507 AD, the Visigoths had lost most of their territories in Gaul after they were defeated by Frankish king Clovis I at the Battle of Vouillé in 507. They retained control of Spain, making Toledo their capital. The Visigoth kingdom reached its height under kings like Liuvigild, who reigned from 568 to 586 CE. His rule is marked by military conquests, political maneuvers, and attempts at religious unification. He defeated the Suebi and fought off Byzantine incursions. Liuvigild is credited with founding new cities, including Recopolis, named after his son Recared. This act not only demonstrated his power, but also contributed to urban development within the kingdom. The kingdom became a melting pot of Visigothic and Hispano-Roman cultures, with a strong legal system based on the Visigothic code. The Visigoths began to adopt Roman customs and Christianity. They established churches and synods that facilitated the integration of Roman culture into their society. The Council of Toledo in 400 AD was particularly significant in addressing issues within the church and governance. Perhaps the most lasting influence of the Visigoths came through culture. Scholars like Isidore of Seville preserved Roman knowledge while integrating it into Gothic society. His work laid the foundations for medieval Spanish thought and education. Under Isidore's influence, the kingdom thrived culturally and religiously. Isidore of Seville, also known by his Latin name Isidorus Hispalensis, was a distinguished Hispano-Roman scholar, theologian, and archbishop who lived from around 560 until his death on April 4, 636. He is remembered as one of the last great minds of the ancient world, significantly influencing the intellectual and cultural development of early medieval Spain. Born in Cartagena to a noble family, Isidore received his early education from his elder brother Leander, a highly regarded bishop. This close family relationship deeply shaped Isidore's lifelong dedication to learning and the Christian faith. Around the year 600 CE, Isidore succeeded his brother Leander as the Archbishop of Seville. He played a central role in converting the Arian Visigoths to Chalcedonian Christianity, working in concert with Visigothic rulers to foster religious unity in a kingdom often divided between Arianism and Catholicism. Isidore was actively involved in various church councils, most notably the Councils of Toledo, which helped define church policies and strengthen the alignment between the monarchy and the church. His most renowned work, Etymologiae, is an encyclopedic collection that spans a wide range of subjects such as grammar, rhetoric, law, medicine, and theology. It became a vital resource for medieval scholars and was widely used as a reference and educational text for many centuries. Isidore was a fervent proponent of education. He promoted the establishment of schools and called for seminaries in every diocese, ensuring that the clergy received adequate instruction. His efforts aimed to preserve the remnants of classical knowledge, which were under threat during the turmoil of barbarian invasions. Thanks to his initiatives, much of ancient learning was safeguarded, earning Isidore the title the schoolmaster of the Middle Ages. His works laid the groundwork for the educational frameworks of medieval Europe. In recognition of his immense contributions to learning and scholarship, Isidore was canonized by the Catholic Church in 1598 and is honored as the patron saint of various groups, including farmers, underscoring his enduring influence in the promotion of knowledge. Isidore passed away on April 4, 636, after more than 30 years of service as an archbishop. His legacy persisted, shaping religious thought and educational practices well beyond his lifetime across medieval Europe. In conclusion, Isidore of Seville was a critical figure in the history of early medieval Spain. His scholarly achievements and dedication to education played a key role in preserving ancient knowledge while helping to bring about unity in a time of religious and cultural change. The latter years of the Visigothic kingdom were marked by significant political turmoil. Following the death of King Witiza in 710, a power struggle ensued between rival factions. Roderick, who seized the throne, faced opposition from supporters of Witiza's family, particularly Aquila, who claimed kingship in parts of the north. This division weakened the central authority and created an environment of civil war and treachery among the ruling elite. The internal conflicts led to a fragmented state where loyalty was divided among competing claimants to the throne. The historical sources indicate that there were effectively two kings at one point after Witiza's death, which further complicated governance and military response to external threats. The most decisive factor in the downfall was the invasion by Muslim forces from North Africa. In 711, Tariq ibn Ziyad led an army across the Strait of Gibraltar, landing at Calpe, modern Gibraltar. He swiftly defeated Roderick at the Battle of Guadalete, where many members of the Visigothic elite were killed. This defeat opened the way for further Muslim advances into Hispania. Following their victory at Guadalete, Muslim forces quickly advanced through much of the Iberian Peninsula with little organized resistance from the fragmented Visigothic forces. By 712, most of Hispania was under Muslim control, with only small regions remaining free. The combination of civil strife and external invasion led to a rapid collapse of central authority in the Visigothic kingdom. The internal divisions made it difficult for the Visigoths to mount an effective defense against the Muslim incursions. Once Roderick was defeated and key leaders were lost, there was little left to organize resistance. In the aftermath of their defeat, remnants of Visigothic nobility began to organize resistance movements in northern regions, leading to the eventual establishment of the Kingdom of Asturias under Pelayo. This marked the beginning of what would become known as the Reconquista, a centuries-long effort to reclaim territory from Muslim rule. As the Visigoths, under King Alaric, left their mark on the crumbling Roman Empire, their story was far from the end of the Gothic influence in history. While the Visigoths settled and forged their kingdom in the west, another powerful Gothic tribe was rising in the east. The Ostrogoths, led by a brilliant and ambitious leader, Theodoric the Great, the Ostrogoths would soon play a defining role in what remained of the Roman Empire. Their chapter in history is just as dramatic and perhaps even more decisive in the fate of Rome. Let's explore how they reshaped the future of Europe. Theodoric was born in 454 AD in Pannonia, near the old antique city of Carnuntum, modern-day Austria. He was born in the time when Goths had thrown off nearly a century of domination by the Huns. Remember from our video about the Huns, Attila died in 453, and soon after that, Huns' kingdom perished. He was a son of chieftain Theodemir, Germanic Amali nobleman. Amali were the leading dynasty of the Goths and became the royal house of the Ostrogoths later in the 5th century. Theodoric was sent to Constantinople as a hostage in 461, when his father Theodemir signed a treaty with Eastern Roman Emperor Leo I. He stayed in Constantinople until 469 and received classical education, at least from a barbaric point of view. He learned to read, write, and perform arithmetic. We will soon return to his journey. We briefly talked about barbaric invasions and fall of Rome in our recent videos, but as Latin proverb goes, repetitio est mater studiorum, or repetition is the mother of learning. We will quickly repeat what we already know and add some new informations about the state of Europe in that period. So to begin with, Huns have been gone since around 453 to 454 AD. Vandals have had their own kingdom in North Africa since 435. We covered them in depth in our last video. Visigoths, western cousins of Ostrogoths, established a kingdom in Iberian Peninsula and southern part of ex-Roman province Gaul, modern France. Their kingdom lasts from 418 to 711 AD, when it was destroyed by Tariq ibn Ziyad, a Muslim Berber client of Musa bin Nusayr, the governor of Islamic Africa. Franks, about whom we will talk extensively, established their kingdom under the rule of their prominent king, Clovis I, in northern Gaul, modern Belgium, Netherlands, France. Today's video is all about the Ostrogoths, the eastern branch of the great Gothic tribe, their leader Theodoric the Great and his kingdom. Stay with me until the end to discover the fascinating details of these significant historical events. In the north, Britain has its own Anglo-Saxon history from 410 AD on. At that year, Western Roman Empire decided to abandon the province Britannia, and soon after Germanic tribes of Angles, Saxon and Jutes began to settle in Britain. We will cover those events in depth in the near future. In the Eastern Mediterranean, there was the Great East Roman Empire, or Byzantine Empire, which survived until 1453 and played a key role in European Middle Age politics until then. For the record, the name Byzantine Empire was invented by humanist historian Hieronymus Wolff in 1557 when his work Corpus Historiae Byzantina was published. People of the Eastern Roman Empire called themselves Romans until the end of the empire in 1453. Now, I owe you a story about exactly how the so-called fall of Rome happened. There are few characters important in this story. Our main protagonists are Romulus Augustulus, young boy emperor, and the other one is Odoacer, Germanic military leader in Italy. There are a few more important persons: Orestes, Romulus's father from Roman province Pannonia, with ties to the late Attila and his Huns, and Julius Nepos, Western Roman emperor from 475 to 476. For not to be too long, Orestes became Magister Militum, top Roman military leader in 475. He was appointed by Julius Nepos. After that, Orestes took control of Ravenna. Ravenna was capital of Western Empire since 402. After that, Julius Nepos had to fled to Salona, modern Split, Croatia. Orestes then elevated his son Romulus as Augustus. Romulus Augustulus was deposed by Odoacer on 4th September 476. He was sent to monastery in Ravenna. His father Orestes was not so lucky. Odoacer warriors killed him on August 28th. After that, Odoacer did not appoint a new emperor like Germanic warlords did in previous situations like that. He ruled Italy by himself, backed by the Roman Senate. He was recognizing the overlordship of the Eastern Emperor, Zeno. So now we know exactly what happened in Rome on the 4th of September 476. We should ask ourselves, what is the correct word or phrase to describe the end of the Roman Empire? Is it the fall of the Roman Empire? Is it collapse of the Roman Empire? Or is it better to use the somewhat neutral and undramatic word transformation? If we listen to Paul Friedman, professor for medieval history at Yale University, the end of the Roman Empire was not a one-day event, but a slow disintegration that lasted from around 410 to approximately 480. It was dismembered by barbarian groups. We talk about them in our videos. Their intention was not to destroy the Roman Empire, except for the Huns. They wanted to be part of the empire to share its wealth and accomplishments. Our story about Theodoric and his Ostrogothic kingdom in Italy confirms that theory. Theodoric's father died in 471, and Theodoric became his successor, leading Goths around Balkan Peninsula to find a place to live. Goths moved to Lower Moesia, today Bulgaria, and had some internal problems with other Gothic groups, especially with a group led by chieftain Theodoric Strabo. At that time, the situation in Balkan Peninsula was chaotic, and Theodoric had to show a lot of ability to overcome all the problems that he faced. Theodoric had turbulent relations with the Eastern Roman Empire and its emperor Zeno. Zeno ruled in the Eastern Empire from 474 to 491. He gave him the title of patrician and the office of master of the soldiers, and even appointed him as consul in 484. But Theodoric was attacking Eastern Roman provinces on numerous occasions nonetheless. The big change in the life of Theodoric came in 488, when he was ordered by Zeno to attack Odoacer in Italy due to very tense relations between Odoacer and the Eastern Roman Empire. The war between Theodoric and Odoacer lasted until 493. It was bloody and took a great toll on people in the Odoacer kingdom. And now it is time to tell you a story about how Odoacer life finished. As I said, It was an event worthy of Game of Thrones. It was some kind of a red wedding. When Ostrogoths were unable to take Ravenna, two leaders agreed they would rule the kingdom together. There was a feast organized to honor that on the 15th of March, 493. And on 15th March, do you know who was killed on 15th March circa 500 years earlier? Julius Caesar in 44 BCE. 15th March in the Roman Empire was the day of Ide of March, the day associated with misfortune and doom. And that day was really doomed for Caesar, and 547 years later for great Odoacer, conqueror of Rome. It is said that on the feast, Theodoric killed him with his own hands, sliced him in half, but let's leave details alone, as they are bloody as hell. Theodoric went on to murder the dead man's wife and son, and to massacre his followers remorselessly throughout northern Italy. After that, Theodoric ruled in Italy all but himself, and the stage is set for the story about the Ostrogothic kingdom, an important player in Europe at the beginning of the Middle Ages. Theodoric styled himself simply as king, or rex in Latin. Like his predecessor Odovacar, Theodoric understood the importance of recognition from the Eastern Roman emperor. Diplomatic missions seeking confirmation of his rule were dispatched to Constantinople before Theodoric had even secured full control of Italy. However, Emperor Zeno's death in 491 complicated matters, and his successor Anastasius hesitated to recognize Theodoric's authority. Thus, Theodoric's rise to kingship in Italy occurred without imperial approval. Only after extended negotiations in 498 did Anastasius finally acknowledge Theodoric's rule by returning the Ornamenta Palatii, symbolizing acceptance of Theodoric's independent reign over Italy. One of Theodoric's first challenges was finding a suitable location for his Ostrogothic followers. Rather than dispersing them widely across the Italian peninsula, he chose to settle them primarily in the north, around cities like Pavia, Ravenna, and Picenum. For 33 years, Ostrogoths and Romans coexisted relatively peacefully, despite notable cultural differences. The military remained firmly in the hands of the Ostrogoths, with Roman citizens largely excluded from army and officer roles. The Ostrogothic kingdom is often highlighted among the barbarian successor states for its uniquely Roman character. Theodoric's policies reflected a commitment to integrating the Goths into Roman political structures, striving for a unified rule over both Goths and Romans within the framework of Roman imperial traditions. As the ruler of Italy, Theodoric managed two governmental hubs, Ravenna, home to the imperial administration, and Rome, the seat of the Senate. Balancing the power and influence between these two centers required Theodoric's careful attention, a challenge faced by many of his predecessors as well. Theodoric was also adept at forging alliances with other so-called barbarian kingdoms through strategic marriages, setting a precedent for the use of marriage as a political tool, a practice that would define medieval diplomacy. He arranged for his sisters and daughters to marry key rulers of the time, including the Frankish king Clovis I, who wed Theodoric's sister. Between 504 and 505, Theodoric expanded his influence in the Balkans by defeating the Gepids and acquiring Pannonia. By 523, Theodoric's kingdom reached its zenith, stretching from the Atlantic to the Danube. However, his later reign was marred by the execution of the Roman scholar Boethius, an act Theodoric came to regret. Theodoric died in August 526 and was laid to rest in a grand tomb in Ravenna, which still stands today. He was succeeded by his grandson Alaric, the son of his daughter Amalasuntha. Boethius and Cassiodorus are two key figures in the preservations of classical learning from antique to the Middle Ages. Boethius, born in Rome in 480 into a wealthy patrician family, was probably one of the last persons in the West who knew Greek. For sure, he was the last person who tried to make Greek knowledge known to people who could only read in Latin. His goal was to translate all of Plato and Aristotle into Latin. His project was never completed because he was accused by Theodoric of conspiring with the Byzantine Empire to overthrow him. Before he was executed, aged 44, in 524, he was imprisoned for a year, and during that time he wrote his most important work, one of magnificent works of philosophy named Consolation of Philosophy. Cassiodorus, on the other side, lived to be 90. Cassiodorus was more oriented towards Latin learning. He was a religious figure like Boethius. Boethius wrote on Christian topics, but the Consolation of Philosophy was stoical work and has very little explicitly about Christianity. On the other side is one of the most important achievements of Cassiodorus, his idea that monks should copy manuscripts, according to Professor Paul Friedman from Yale. Cassiodorus thought that places where antique knowledge and culture should be preserved are monasteries. The praxis was then widely spread through Europe during the entire Middle Ages, although until the time of Cassiodorus monasteries were anti-intellectual institutions where you pray and you don't spend a lot of time reading, let alone copying, let alone thinking. The fate of Boethius showed the sort of duality of the barbarian patronage of culture. On the one hand, Theodoric tried to be as civilized as possible. He tried to unite late Roman and barbarian Ostrogothic ideology. On the other hand, he executed Boethius, which of course is not only barbarian praxis. We all know fate of great Seneca, who was forced to commit suicide by Emperor Nero. So, the fate of the intellectuals in the Roman Empire is not necessarily so much better than the fate of intellectuals in barbarian kingdoms. The difference is that there were very few intellectuals in barbarian kingdoms. To conclude this chapter, we can easily state that Boethius and Cassiodorus are two of the smartest people of the 6th century, judging by what they wrote. Like Isidore of Seville is one of the smartest men of the 7th century, and Bede and Alcuin are the same in the 8th century. So the fact that both worked in the Ostrogothic kingdom underlines the fact of its importance for the early Middle Ages history. Following Theodoric's death on 30 August 526, his accomplishments swiftly began to unravel. With Eutharic having passed away in 523, Theodoric was succeeded by his young grandson Alaric, under the regency of his mother Amalasuntha. The absence of a strong and capable successor led to the gradual collapse of the intricate alliances that had held the Ostrogothic state together. Amalasuntha's regency was marked by turmoil, and after a series of conspiracies and the death of her son Alaric in 534, she was executed in early May 535. Her downfall provided Eastern Roman Emperor Justinian, fresh from his victory in the Vandalic Wars, as discussed in our previous video on the Vandals, with a convenient pretext to intervene in Italy and dismantle the Ostrogothic kingdom. Thus began the Gothic War, which raged from 535 to 554 across Italy, Dalmatia, Sardinia, Sicily, and Corsica. The war stemmed from Justinian's broader goal of reclaiming the provinces of the former Western Roman Empire, lost to barbarian incursions during the migration period. By the war's end, Italy lay in ruins, its population drastically reduced. This devastation left the Byzantine victors too weakened to fend off the Lombard invasion of 568, which led to the loss of much of the Italian peninsula. So there we have it, from the rise of the Visigoths, led by King Alaric, who shook the very foundations of ancient Rome in 410 AD, to the rise of the Ostrogoths under the rule of Theodoric the Great, who carved out his own legacy in the ruins of the Roman Empire. These moments were more than just the fall of a city or the displacement of emperors. They were the beginning of a new era in the history of Europe. Through ambition, survival, and resilience, the Goths played a pivotal role in shaping the world as we know it today. Their story is a reminder that history is never just about the rise and fall of empires. It's about the people, their struggles, and their vision for the future. In the shadows of history, one kingdom rose from the ashes of chaos and ultimately crumbled in ruin. This is the story of the Vandal kingdom, its rise to power, its reign of terror, and its tragic fall. But how did a once obscure people from the fringes of Germania rise to challenge the mighty Roman Empire? What drove them to sack the Eternal City itself? And why did their kingdom collapse so quickly after reaching its zenith? In this video, we'll track the Vandals from their origins in Northern Europe to their conquest of Carthage and their notorious sack of Rome. We'll explore how they ruled the Mediterranean and what led to their rapid downfall, uncovering the truth behind their lasting legacy. The story of the Vandals begins long before their rise to power in North Africa. Their origins lie far to the north, in the dark forests and rugged landscapes of what is now southern Poland, where they settled in Silesia from around 120 BC. They are associated with so-called Przeworsk culture. The earliest known reference to the Vandals comes from the Roman savant Pliny the Elder. In his Natural History, Pliny wrote of a people he called the Vandalii, grouping them with other Germanic tribes such as the Burgundians and the Goths. Yet even Pliny, with his vast knowledge, could not have foreseen the path this mysterious tribe would take. The Vandals were part of a larger group of East Germanic peoples, likely associated with the Lugi, another powerful tribe mentioned by Roman historians. They were originally settled between the Oder and Vistula rivers in what is now modern-day Poland. But like so many other groups in this tumultuous period, the Vandals were on the move, driven by a complex web of pressures, including conflict with neighboring tribes and the encroaching threat of the Huns from the east. In the 2nd century BC, the Vandals began migrating southward, expanding their influence into Dacia and Pannonia. By the time of the Roman Empire, they were well established along the Danube frontier. However, their fortunes changed dramatically in the early 5th century, when they became swept up in the great migrations that would reshape the face of Europe. In 406 AD, during one of the harshest winters on record, the Vandals, along with the Alans and the Suebi, crossed the frozen Rhine River into Roman Gaul. The Roman Empire, already crumbling under internal strife and external threats, was unable to stop the wave of devastation that followed. For years, the Vandals moved across Gaul, plundering towns and cities, leaving devastation in their wake. Feared by many, admired by a few for their tenacity and ambition, the Vandals proved to be more than just raiders. They were searching for a home, and they would not rest until they found one. Their journey would eventually lead them to the Iberian Peninsula, where they settled for a time. But conflict with the Visigoths, who were operating under Roman orders, forced the Vandals to seek new opportunities elsewhere. And so, under the leadership of their most famous king, Genseric, they set their sights on North Africa. In 429 AD, the Vandals crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and began their invasion of Roman North Africa. It is said that the Roman military commander Bonifacius, embroiled in a power struggle with the empire, may have even invited the Vandals to assist him. If that was indeed the case, Bonifacius severely underestimated his new allies. Genseric, a cunning and ruthless leader, quickly seized control of much of North Africa, including the vital city of Carthage in 439 AD. With the capture of this crucial trading hub, the Vandals transformed from a nomadic tribe into rulers of one of the most fertile and wealthy regions of the ancient world. Though the Vandals are often remembered as destroyers, the truth is far more complex. Their kingdom in North Africa was a melting pot of cultures, reflecting the influences of the many peoples they had encountered on their journey: Romans, Berbers, Alans, and even Visigoths. The Vandals adopted many elements of Roman culture, including their language. Latin remained the official language of the Vandal administration, and many Roman customs were maintained. Yet, the Vandals also brought their own distinct identity to the region. They were followers of Arian Christianity, a branch of Christianity that was considered heretical by the Roman Catholic Church. This religious difference would prove to be a source of tension in the kingdom, as the predominantly Catholic Roman population often found itself at odds with their Vandal rulers. However, the Vandals were not simply invaders imposing their will on the people. Under Genseric, they managed to create a stable, functioning state, albeit one that was constantly at odds with the rest of the Roman world. The Vandals also adopted naval warfare as a central part of their strategy. With Carthage as their base, they launched devastating raids across the Mediterranean, targeting the coasts of Italy, Spain, and even Greece. Their most infamous act came in 455 AD, when they sacked the city of Rome itself. The world was shocked, not just by the attack, but by the methodical and relatively bloodless nature of the sack. Unlike the Visigoths, who had ravaged the city 45 years earlier, the Vandals were careful to preserve much of Rome's wealth, though they did carry off countless treasures and captives. Among the leaders of the Vandals, one name stands above the rest: Genseric, also known as Gaiseric. In the pantheon of barbarian kings who threatened Rome, Genseric stands as one of the most brilliant and cunning. His rise to power marked the beginning of the Vandal kingdom's golden age. Genseric was not born to be king. He was the illegitimate son of the Vandal king Gunderic, but fate had other plans for him. When Gunderic died in 428 AD, Genseric took the throne, and the course of Vandal history shifted forever. Under his reign, the Vandals transformed from a wandering people into a feared kingdom. Genseric was more than just a king. He was a strategist. He knew that for the Vandals to survive, they couldn't stay in Iberia, where they were vulnerable to Roman and Visigothic forces. He set his sights on North Africa, a region that, if conquered, would provide the Vandals with a fertile land, rich in resources and a foothold in the Mediterranean. In 429 AD, Genseric led his people across the Strait of Gibraltar into Roman North Africa. With him, he brought an army of 15,000 to 20,000 men, battle-hardened warriors ready to stake their claim in a new land. The Roman Empire, distracted by internal strife, was unprepared for what was to come. The conquest of North Africa was swift and brutal. The Vandals moved from town to town, city to city, leaving devastation in their wake. Genseric's most significant victory came in 439 AD with the capture of Carthage, the crown jewel of Roman North Africa. Carthage was the second largest city in the Western Roman Empire, and its loss was a blow from which the Romans would never fully recover. But how did Genseric manage to take such a critical city with relatively little resistance? The answer lies in the timing and Genseric's cunning. The Roman Empire was fighting on multiple fronts, and its resources were stretched thin. Genseric seized the opportunity, launching a surprise attack while most of the city's defenders were at the circus, watching races in the hippodrome. By the time they realized what had happened, it was too late. Carthage had fallen. This victory didn't just give the Vandals a city, it gave them a base from which to launch further campaigns. With Carthage under their control, the Vandals now dominated the Western Mediterranean. From their new capital, they built a powerful fleet that would become the scourge of the seas. The Mediterranean, once known as the Roman Lake, became for a time the Vandal Sea. Genseric's ambitions did not stop with North Africa. He set his sights on Rome itself. In 455 AD, he launched what would become one of the most infamous raids in history, the sack of Rome. While many remember the Visigoths for sacking the city in 410 AD, it was the Vandals' raid that left the most lasting impression. Genseric's forces entered the city and systematically looted it for 14 days. They stripped Rome of its treasures, its art, and its dignity. Yet, unlike many other barbarian invasions, the Vandals avoided unnecessary bloodshed. Genseric's goal was not to destroy, but to take what Rome could no longer protect. At its height, the Vandal kingdom appeared strong, controlling North Africa's wealthiest provinces and striking fear across the Mediterranean with their formidable navy. But beneath the surface, cracks began to form. Several key factors contributed to the gradual weakening of the Vandal kingdom, leading to its eventual downfall. First and foremost was internal instability. After the death of their most powerful king, Genseric, in 477 AD, the kingdom began to unravel. Genseric's iron rule had held the Vandal state together, but his successors lacked his strategic genius and firm grip on power. The law of succession Genseric had implemented, where the eldest male of the royal family inherited the throne, prevented fragmentation but created fierce rivalries within the Vandal nobility. These power struggles often spilled over into court politics, eroding the strength of the monarchy. Religious tension also contributed significantly to the kingdom's fragility. The Vandals were staunch Arian Christians, a branch of Christianity that Roman Catholics considered heretical. Their persecution of Catholic subjects deepened the divide between the Vandal rulers and the local Roman population, creating resentment and unrest. Many of the Catholic inhabitants of North Africa viewed the Vandals as oppressive overlords, making it difficult for the Vandal kings to maintain a loyal and cohesive society. The refusal to reconcile with the Catholic majority left the kingdom vulnerable to internal dissent and external manipulation. But the most significant factor that led to the Vandals' downfall was the external threat from the Byzantine Empire. While the Western Roman Empire had crumbled, the Eastern Roman Empire, centered in Constantinople, was growing stronger under the leadership of Emperor Justinian I. Justinian harbored grand ambitions of restoring the Roman Empire to its former glory, and reclaiming North Africa was one of his primary objectives. For the Vandals, this would prove to be the final blow. The end of the Vandal kingdom was swift and dramatic, marked by a series of critical events that sealed their fate. In 533 AD, Emperor Justinian I launched the Vandalic War, an aggressive campaign to retake North Africa. The Byzantine general Belisarius, known for his military brilliance, was tasked with the invasion. Belisarius carefully planned his assault, aware that the Vandals were weakened by internal strife and lacked the cohesion that had once made them formidable. At the time, Vandal King Gelimer, the last of the Vandal kings, was dealing with his own internal problems. A rebellion in Sardinia had drawn much of his military forces away from North Africa, leaving his kingdom vulnerable. Belisarius capitalized on this opportunity, landing his forces near Carthage without facing significant resistance. In September 533, Belisarius won a decisive victory at the Battle of Ad Decimum, just outside Carthage. The Vandals initially had the upper hand, but the sudden death of Gelimer's brother in battle threw the Vandal forces into disarray. Gelimer, overwhelmed by grief and panic, fled the battlefield, leaving his army leaderless and vulnerable. With Carthage now wide open, Belisarius entered the city without a fight. It was the beginning of the end. A few months later, in December 533, the Byzantines and Vandals clashed again at the Battle of Tricamarum. This time, the Vandals were soundly defeated. Gelimer's forces, already demoralized, could not withstand the Byzantine onslaught. Gelimer fled into the mountains, and by 534, he surrendered to Belisarius, bringing an end to the Vandal kingdom. In a matter of months, the kingdom that had ruled over North Africa for nearly a century was no more. The Vandals' dream of an empire in the Mediterranean had come to a swift and bitter end. The fall of the Vandal kingdom was the result of a perfect storm: internal divisions, religious strife, and the relentless pressure of a resurgent Byzantine empire. But while their kingdom may have crumbled, their legacy endures. The Vandals' story is one of both triumph and tragedy, of power won and lost. In the end, they were more than the Vandals of history. They were a people who carved out a place for themselves in a chaotic world, leaving a legacy that, for better or worse, continues to shape our understanding of the ancient world. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into the Vandal kingdom and want to explore more untold stories from history, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Don't miss out on future videos where we unravel the mysteries of the past together. Also, if you're passionate about discussing the European Middle Ages and want to continue the conversation, I'd love to see you in our Facebook group, where we have lively discussions and share insights about history. The link is in the description below. Come join the community and share your thoughts. It is the dawn of the early Middle Ages. Western Europe lies in ruins. The Roman Empire long collapsed, its legacy fading into memory. In this void, a new force emerges, one that will shape the future of the continent. A single leader rises from the chaos: Clovis I, the founder of the Merovingian dynasty. By uniting the fractured tribes of the Franks, the history of the Franks begins in the shadow of the Roman Empire during the twilight of the Roman West. Roman historians and chroniclers such as Ammianus Marcellinus and the Panegyrici Latini refer to the Franks as a confederation of Germanic tribes settled along the lower and middle Rhine River. The Franks were not a singular unified people at this time, but rather a coalition of different groups, which included both the Salian Franks and the Ripuarian Franks. By the late Roman period, the Franks had gained a reputation as fierce warriors and skilled raiders. Throughout the 3rd and 4th centuries AD, they conducted frequent raids into Roman territory, particularly along the Rhine, taking advantage of the empire's growing internal and external vulnerabilities. These incursions earned them a reputation in Roman eyes as both a threat and, increasingly, a valuable source of military manpower. As noted by Ian Wood in the Merovingian kingdoms 450 to 751, the Franks emerge in the sources as both a militarily powerful force and a flexible political group that could form alliances with Rome when needed. This adaptability, according to Wood, enabled them to gradually evolve from raiders to political allies within the Roman sphere of influence. By the late 4th century, the Franks were divided into 3 main groups: the Salian Franks, the Ripuarian Franks, and the Mosan Franks. These divisions were both geographical and political, shaped by the regions each group occupied. The Salian Franks settled in the Roman province of Gaul, occupying what is now the Netherlands and Belgium. As Patrick Geary explains in Before France and Germany, the creation and transformation of the Merovingian world, the Salian Franks were among the first Germanic peoples to be incorporated into the Roman Empire as foederati, with privileges that granted them land and a stake in the defense of the frontier. The Ripuarian Franks lived along the Middle Rhine near Cologne. Their traditional Germanic ways persisted longer than their Salian counterparts, though, as Geary notes, the gradual integration of Ripuarians into the Roman military system marked a shift in the relationship between the empire and its former enemies. The Mosan Franks occupied the Meuse River Valley in modern-day Wallonia. Though less documented, archaeological evidence highlights their integration into Roman society, while maintaining a distinct Frankish identity. As Chris Wickham points out in The Inheritance of Rome, the strategic importance of the Meuse Valley made the Mosan Franks a key player in the Roman defense strategy, while their semi-autonomy allowed them to maintain a unique cultural and political identity. These groups, while distinct, were connected by a common Frankish identity and were gradually drawn into the orbit of Roman politics as the empire struggled to maintain control over its western provinces. The relationship between the Franks and the Roman Empire evolved significantly from the 3rd century AD to the 5th century AD. Initially viewed as raiders and barbarians, the Franks became increasingly integrated into Roman military and political life, serving both as enemies and later as crucial allies, foederati. Roman emperors and generals often had to navigate a complex relationship with the Franks, balancing the need for their military support with the constant threat they posed to the stability of the empire. The first notable confrontations between the Romans and the Franks occurred during the crisis of the 3rd century, when the Roman Empire faced multiple internal and external challenges. The Franks, at this time still a loose confederation of tribes, took advantage of the weakening Roman frontier defences to raid deep into Roman Gaul and Hispania. One of the earliest Roman emperors to confront the Franks was Probus, who launched a series of successful military campaigns to push the Franks back across the Rhine. In 277 AD, Probus defeated a large Frankish force that had invaded Gaul. According to Roman sources, Probus captured many Franks, some of whom were settled within the empire to serve as farmers or military auxiliaries. This marked an early instance of the Roman practice of integrating barbarian tribes through settlement and military service, a strategy that would later define Rome's relationship with the Franks. Constantine the Great played a significant role in this evolving relationship. His campaigns against the Franks in the early 4th century were both punitive and diplomatic. Constantine defeated the Salian Franks in 310 AD, but as Ian Wood points out, he also established the precedent of settling defeated Franks within Roman territory as foederati. This blend of military might and political pragmatism defined the Roman approach to dealing with the Franks in the coming centuries. In 310 AD, Constantine again defeated the Franks, this time executing their leaders as a demonstration of Roman power. However, Constantine also adopted a policy of settlement, allowing the Salian Franks to settle in the region of Toxandria, modern-day Belgium, and the Netherlands. This marked the beginning of the Franks' formal integration into the Roman Empire as foederati. Tribes settled on Roman lands in exchange for military service. Constantine's campaigns thus established a dual policy of both confronting and co-opting the Franks, setting a pattern that future emperors would follow. By the late 4th century, the Franks had become a crucial part of the Roman military system. Both the Salian and Ripuarian Franks were formally recognized as foederati, with many Frankish warriors serving in the Roman army. This relationship benefited both sides. The Franks gained land and security within the empire, while the Romans secured additional troops to defend the crumbling frontiers. One of the key figures in this evolving relationship was Julian, later known as Julian the Apostate. As Caesar, junior emperor, in the west under Constantius II, Julian was given command of Gaul and the task of securing the Rhine frontier, which was under threat from various barbarian groups, including the Franks. In 356 AD, Julian faced a major Frankish incursion into Gaul. The Franks had overrun several Roman cities, and Julian led a successful campaign to expel them from the province. One of his most notable victories was the siege and defeat of the Salian Franks at the city of Colonia Agrippina, modern Cologne. After driving them out, Julian adopted a more diplomatic approach, settling many of the Salian Franks in Roman territory as foederati and securing their loyalty as military allies. As Patrick Geary explains, Julian's success in pushing back the Franks and his later settlement of them within the empire highlights the balancing act that Roman emperors had to perform, using the barbarians as both a threat and a resource. Valentinian I, another Western Roman emperor, played a critical role in managing the Franks during the late 4th century. Valentinian was deeply concerned with the defense of the Rhine frontier and spent much of his reign fortifying the region against barbarian invasions. In 367 AD, Valentinian launched a series of military campaigns to deal with renewed Frankish raids into Roman territory. One of his most notable confrontations came in 370 AD when the Ripuarian Franks invaded Gaul. Valentinian's forces successfully repelled the invaders, and he subsequently strengthened Rome's relationship with the Salian Franks, granting them greater autonomy in return for military support. This cemented the role of the Franks as both protectors of the Roman frontier and, increasingly, as settlers within Roman territory. The 5th century saw the final collapse of the Western Roman Empire, during which time the Franks transitioned from federati to independent rulers of Roman Gaul. This period was marked by both cooperation and conflict between the Franks and Rome, as Roman authority in the West disintegrated and barbarian groups carved out their own kingdoms. One of the most significant military figures during this period was Flavius Stilicho, a Roman general of Vandal origin, who served as the Magister Militum, master of soldiers, under Emperor Honorius. Stilicho had a complicated relationship with the Franks, who were caught up in the wider conflicts of the time. In 406 AD, a massive invasion of Germanic tribes, including the Vandals, Alans, and Suebi, crossed the frozen Rhine River and flooded into Roman Gaul. The Franks, particularly the Salian Franks, were caught up in these events, as some fought against these new invaders while others used the chaos to expand their own territories. Stilicho, already stretched thin defending Italy from the Visigoths, was unable to fully protect Gaul, and the Franks took advantage of the power vacuum to increase their influence. By the mid-5th century, Roman authority in Gaul was in steep decline. Roman commanders like Aegidius and his son Syagrius relied increasingly on Frankish support to maintain control over their territories. According to Dan Jones, Aegidius's relationship with the Salian Franks marked the last phase of Roman-Gallic cooperation, as both sides knew that Roman power in the region was crumbling. This delicate alliance would collapse with the rise of Clovis I, who would eventually defeat Syagrius and end the last vestiges of Roman rule in northern Gaul. However, the relationship between Aegidius and the Franks was not always smooth. After Aegidius's death, his son Syagrius maintained control over this enclave, which became known as the domain of Soissons. In 486 AD, the domain of Soissons would be conquered by Clovis III, marking the definitive end of Roman rule in Gaul and the beginning of the Frankish kingdom under Merovingian leadership. As the Western Roman Empire crumbled, the Franks took advantage of the vacuum to consolidate their power. The Battle of the Catalonian Plains in 451 AD, where the Franks fought alongside the Romans against Attila the Hun, was one of the last great examples of cooperation between the two. Chris Wickham emphasizes that this battle symbolized the fading influence of Rome in Gaul and the growing independence of groups like the Franks, who would soon assert themselves as rulers in their own right. By 457 AD, the Franks had moved from being federati to independent powers, positioning themselves to fill the void left by the disintegration of Roman rule in Gaul. Their role as both protectors of and inheritors from the Roman Empire set the stage for the emergence of Childeric I, who would lay the foundation for the Merovingian dynasty. As noted by Patrick Geary, the early history of the Franks is one of adaptation and opportunism, seizing the moment as the Roman Empire disintegrated and carving out their own identity and political power in Gaul. By the mid-5th century, the Franks had positioned themselves to play a decisive role in the post-Roman world, with their political and military structures firmly rooted in both Roman and Germanic traditions. This transition would culminate in the reign of Childeric the first known king of the Franks, whose legacy would pave the way for his son Clovis I to unify the Frankish tribes. Collapse of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century AD marked one of the most transformative periods in European history. As Roman authority crumbled, the vacuum it left behind was filled by a multitude of groups, some familiar, others obscure. This era of upheaval and adaptation is what historians call late antiquity, a time when old institutions fell and new kingdoms rose from the wreckage of empire. In earlier chapters of this series, we explored the dramatic stories of peoples who reshaped the map of Europe. We followed the Goths, who carved out powerful kingdoms in Italy and Spain. We traced the Vandals' remarkable journey from Central Europe to North Africa, where they briefly ruled as masters of the Mediterranean. We saw how the Huns terrorized both Romans and barbarians alike, creating a whirlwind of destruction under Attila, and how the Lombards forged a lasting kingdom in Italy. Each of these groups left its mark on history, blending their identities with Roman culture to create the foundations of medieval Europe. But there is another kingdom, often overshadowed by its more famous contemporaries, whose story deserves to be told: the Burgundians. The Burgundians were a Germanic people who rose to prominence during the chaotic years of Rome's decline. Unlike the Goths or Vandals, they did not embark on large-scale conquests or dominate vast territories. Yet their journey, from early migrations to the establishment of 2 successive kingdoms, provides a fascinating glimpse into the challenges and opportunities faced by smaller tribes navigating the collapse of empire. In their first kingdom, centered near Worms on the Rhine, the Burgundians attempted to carve out a place for themselves on the Roman frontier. But this bold endeavor ended in disaster, forcing the survivors to resettle far to the south, in the Alpine region of Sapordia. It was here, in the shadow of the Alps, that the Burgundians established a more enduring kingdom, blending Germanic traditions with Roman culture. Their history is a tale of survival, adaptation, and eventual assimilation. Though their kingdom ultimately fell to the Franks, the Burgundians' legacy endures in lore, literature, and legend. From their legal code to their role in the epic Nibelungenlied, the Burgundians have left an indelible mark on European culture. In this chapter, we will uncover the story of the Burgundians, their origins, their rise and fall, and their lasting contributions to the medieval world. To understand their journey is to understand another piece of the intricate mosaic that is late antiquity. As always, we will provide you with some additional sources, books from prominent historians, so that you can go even deeper with your studies of European history in late antiquity or early Middle Ages. Peter Heather, who are we already very familiar with, discusses the Burgundians' migration and settlement. The Burgundians, originally from the Baltic island of Bornholm, migrated southwards, eventually establishing a kingdom in the Roman province of Gaul. Guy Halsall was with us when we talked about the Vandals. In Barbarian Migrations and the Roman West, 376 to 568, Halsall examines the movements of barbarian groups like the Burgundians and their impact on the Roman Empire's decline and the formation of new kingdoms. He notes, the Burgundians were among the Germanic tribes that moved into Roman territories, forming a kingdom in the region that would become modern-day Burgundy. Walter Goffart, prominent medieval historian from universities of Toronto and Yale, challenges traditional narratives of barbarian invasions, highlighting how groups like the Burgundians were integrated into Roman society and politics. In Barbarian Tides, the Migration Age and the later Roman Empire, Goffart observes, the Burgundians, like other barbarian groups, were settled within the Roman Empire as federates, playing a role in the empire's defense and administration. Ian N. Wood, in his work, The Burgundians, published by the Boydell Press in 2010, offers a comprehensive history of the Burgundians, covering their origins, migrations, and the political and cultural dynamics of their kingdoms. Wood states, the Burgundians established two successive kingdoms, the first near Worms, which was destroyed by the Huns, and the second in Sapaudia, where they integrated Roman administrative practices. Patrick J. Geary is an American medievalist. He is a professor emeritus of Western medieval history at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey. He examines the integration of groups like the Burgundians into the Merovingian world, emphasizing their influence on the development of medieval political structures. In his book, Before France and Germany, The Creation and Transformation of the Merovingian World, Geary mentions the Burgundians' legal code, the Lex Burgundionum, reflects a synthesis of Roman and Germanic legal traditions, indicative of their role in the transformation of the Roman world. The story of the Burgundians begins far from the heart of the Roman Empire in the forests and waterways of northern Europe. According to later medieval sources, such as the historian Jordanes, the Burgundians originated from the island of Bornholm in the Baltic Sea. Known in Latin as Burgundibus, Bornholm's association with the Burgundians may reflect the tribe's deep-rooted ties to the wider Germanic world. While this account is steeped in legend, archaeological and linguistic evidence suggests that the Burgundians, like many Germanic tribes, were part of a vast network of peoples who inhabited the lands around the Oder and Vistula rivers. These areas were cultural melting pots where trade, migration and warfare shaped the identities of early Germanic groups. By the late 3rd century AD, the Burgundians began migrating southward. This movement was not random, it was driven by complex factors. Changing climate conditions may have disrupted traditional agricultural practices in the north. Simultaneously, pressure from other migrating tribes, including the Goths and Vandals, likely pushed the Burgundians toward new opportunities in the Roman Empire's frontier zones. By the 4th century, the Burgundians had settled along the Middle Rhine River near the Roman province of Germania Prima. This region placed them at the edge of the Roman Empire, a strategic but precarious position. For the Romans, the Burgundians were both a threat and a resource. Like other tribes, they were gradually integrated into the Roman system as federati, federated allies who provided military support in exchange for land and resources. The Burgundians adapted to this role, serving as auxiliaries in the Roman military. They also benefited from trade, gaining access to Roman goods such as weapons, wine, and coins. This relationship, however, was never stable. Roman officials often exploited these alliances for short-term gains, while the Burgundians sought to strengthen their position on the frontier, sometimes through cooperation and at other times through conflict. Despite their integration into the Roman system, the Burgundians remained distinct. Their social structure was centered around kinship groups led by chieftains, and their culture emphasized warrior values, hospitality, and oral traditions. This mix of Roman influence and Germanic identity would become a defining feature of their later kingdoms. The Burgundians' position along the Rhine placed them in direct contact with other Germanic tribes, as well as with the ever-present threat of the Huns. These pressures would eventually lead to a dramatic shift in their fortunes, pushing the Burgundians to establish their first kingdom in the region of Worms, a kingdom that would ultimately be destroyed but not forgotten. Their migration and settlement along the Rhine marked the beginning of their interaction with the Roman world, setting the stage for their role in the transformation of late antiquity. But their story was only beginning. Edward James is a British scholar of medieval history. He is Emeritus Professor of Medieval History at University College, Dublin. In his work, The Franks, published in 1988, he discusses the Burgundians' early movements. The Burgundians, originally from the Baltic region, migrated southwards and settled along the Middle Rhine by the late 3rd century. Herwig Wolfram, in History of the Goths, notes, "The Burgundians, a Germanic tribe, moved from the Vistula basin to the Middle Rhine, establishing themselves as a significant power on the Roman frontier." And Michael Kulikowski, in his book Rome's Gothic Wars, from the 3rd century to Alaric, observes, "The Burgundians, like many Germanic groups, migrated towards the Roman Empire's borders, seeking opportunities within its declining territories. By the early 5th century, the Burgundians had established themselves near the Rhine River, a region that had long been a frontier of the Roman Empire. The Rhine served as both a barrier and a bridge, separating the Roman provinces of Gaul from the Germanic tribal lands to the east. For the Burgundians, this was a region of opportunity, a chance to carve out a kingdom amid the chaos of Rome's weakening control. The settlement of the Burgundians in this region was not a random event, but part of the broader migration patterns of late antiquity. Like other Germanic tribes, the Burgundians sought stability and resources in the shadow of the declining Roman state. Around 413 AD, they established their first kingdom near the Roman city of Worms, under the leadership of their king Gundahar, also known as Gunther. This first Burgundian kingdom was small compared to the vast territories controlled by other Germanic peoples like the Visigoths or the Vandals. Its location along the Rhine made it strategically important, controlling trade routes and offering a base for raids into Roman territories. These raids, however, brought the Burgundians into direct conflict with Roman authorities. King Gundahar's ambitions were fueled by both the need to provide for his people and the desire to expand his kingdom's influence. He led a series of raids into Roman Gaul, seeking plunder and asserting Burgundian dominance. These raids were initially successful, but soon provoked a decisive response from Rome. In 436 AD, the Roman general Flavius Aetius, often called the last of the Romans, launched a campaign to suppress the Burgundians. Aetius, an astute military strategist, enlisted the help of the Huns, a formidable nomadic force that had terrorized much of Europe. Together they devastated the Burgundian kingdom, killing King Gundahar and many of his people. The kingdom of Worms was annihilated, leaving only scattered survivors to continue the Burgundian story. This catastrophic defeat marked the end of the first Burgundian kingdom. However, the memory of Gundahar and his kingdom lived on, immortalized in later medieval epics such as the Nibelungenlied. In this tale, Gundahar, renamed Gunther, became a tragic hero, embodying the resilience and ambition of the Burgundian people. Though their first kingdom was destroyed, the Burgundians would rise again. Resettled by the Romans in the Alpine region of Sapordia, they would go on to establish a more enduring kingdom, blending their Germanic traditions with the Roman cultural and administrative systems they encountered. Peter Heather writes about those events. The Burgundians' first kingdom on the Rhine was short-lived, falling victim to Roman retribution and Hunnic power under the leadership of Flavius Aetius. Ian Wood adds, "The destruction of the Burgundian kingdom at Worms was a pivotal moment, forcing the survivors to adapt and ultimately contribute to the formation of a new political entity in Sapordia." And Guy Halsall concludes, "The defeat of Gundahar and the Burgundians at Worms illustrates the precarious balance of power on the Roman frontier, where barbarian tribes navigated both alliances and enmity with Rome." After the catastrophic defeat of their first kingdom near Worms, the Burgundians faced an uncertain future. However, their story did not end in total annihilation. In 443 AD, the Roman authorities resettled the remaining Burgundians in a region known as Sapoudia, modern-day Savoy in the Western Alps. This strategic relocation was not a gesture of goodwill, but a calculated move to use the Burgundians as a buffer force against other barbarian groups threatening the Roman provinces. The Burgundians were granted land and semi-autonomous control in Sapoudia in exchange for military service. This arrangement marked the beginning of a new chapter in Burgundian history. Unlike their previous kingdom, which had been heavily reliant on raiding, the Burgundians now sought to establish a more stable and integrated society within the framework of Roman administration. The new kingdom was led by a series of kings, starting with Gundioch, who played a critical role in consolidating Burgundian authority in the region. Under Gundioch's leadership, the Burgundians expanded their influence into neighbouring territories, gradually absorbing parts of southeastern Gaul. This period saw a shift in Burgundian priorities from survival to governance as they began to adopt elements of Roman legal and administrative practices. The Alpine region of Sapoudia posed unique challenges. The rugged terrain required the Burgundians to adapt their agricultural and settlement practices. Despite these difficulties, the location proved advantageous, offering natural defences and control over important trade routes between Italy and Gaul. Religious and cultural tensions also played a significant role during this period. The Burgundians were predominantly Arian Christians, a branch of Christianity that was considered heretical by the Nicene Church, dominant among their Roman subjects. This religious divide initially created friction, but over time the Burgundians began to align more closely with the Roman Church. This alignment was partly driven by political necessity, as alliances with Nicene Christian powers, such as the Franks, became increasingly important. This second Burgundian kingdom reached its zenith under the rule of Gundobad, 473 to 516 AD, whose reign was marked by both military strength and legislative innovation. Gundobad's most enduring achievement was the creation of the Lex Burgundionum, a codified legal system that blended Germanic customary laws with Roman legal principles. This legal code not only strengthened Burgundian governance, but also reflected the kingdom's unique position as a cultural and political bridge between the Germanic and Roman worlds. While the kingdom thrived during Gundobad's reign, its fortunes were closely tied to the broader political landscape of late antiquity. The growing power of the Franks to the north and the shifting dynamics of the Roman Empire meant that the Burgundians' autonomy would remain precarious. Nevertheless, the Second Burgundian Kingdom laid the foundation for a legacy that would endure in both legal and cultural traditions. Peter Heather notes, the resettlement of the Burgundians in Sapoudia marked a new phase in their history, allowing them to consolidate power and adapt to a more Romanized framework of governance. Ian Wood furthermore writes, the Alpine region of Sapoudia provided the Burgundians with both opportunities and challenges, shaping the development of their second kingdom as a unique blend of Roman and Germanic traditions. Guy Halsall adds, the Second Burgundian Kingdom was a product of compromise between Roman political pragmatism and Burgundian survival strategies, exemplifying the hybrid nature of post-Roman polities. And Walter Goffart concludes, the Lex Burgundionum stands as a testament to the Burgundians' ability to adapt and innovate within the legal and cultural frameworks of late antiquity. The Second Burgundian Kingdom reached its peak during the reign of King Gundobad, who ruled from 473 to 516 AD. Gundobad was a remarkable figure, a skilled warrior, an astute politician, and a legislator who sought to unify his kingdom through both military might and legal reform. Under his leadership, the Burgundians expanded their influence and solidified their place as a regional power in southeastern Gaul. Gundobad inherited a kingdom that was both diverse and divided. His subjects included not only Burgundian elites, but also Romanized populations who followed different customs, languages, and laws. To govern effectively, Gundobad needed to bridge these cultural divides, a challenge that many Germanic rulers faced during this period. His solution was the creation of the Lex Burgundionum, or the Burgundian Code, a legal framework that blended Germanic customary law with Roman legal traditions. The Lex Burgundionum addressed a wide range of legal issues, from property disputes and inheritance to criminal justice and marriage. It was designed to apply to both Burgundians and Romans, offering a unified legal system that reflected the hybrid nature of Burgundian society. For example, the code included provisions for compensatory payments, known as Wehrgeld, a distinctly Germanic practice, while also incorporating Roman concepts of property ownership and legal procedure. The creation of the Lex Burgundionum was not merely a practical measure, it was also a statement of Gundobad's authority and vision for his kingdom. By codifying laws, he reinforced the legitimacy of Burgundian rule and demonstrated his ability to govern a diverse and complex society. This effort aligned with broader trends in late antiquity, as other barbarian kingdoms, such as the Visigoths, also sought to codify their laws as a means of stabilizing their rule. In addition to his legislative achievements, Gundobad played a crucial role in the political and religious dynamics of the time. Like many Germanic rulers, Gundobad was initially an adherent of Arian Christianity, a branch of the faith that diverged from the Nicene orthodoxy dominant in the Roman Church. This religious divide was a source of tension, particularly with the Franks to the north, who had embraced Nicene Christianity under Clovis I. However, Gundobad's later reign showed signs of rapprochement with the Nicene Church, a shift that may have been driven by both personal conviction and political necessity. Gundobad's reign was also marked by his diplomatic dealings with neighboring powers, particularly the Franks. His niece, Clotilde, became a pivotal figure in this relationship. As the wife of Clovis I, Clotilde influenced her husband's conversion to Nicene Christianity, a moment that reshaped the political and religious landscape of Gaul. While this alliance initially helped stabilize relations between the Burgundians and the Franks, it also set the stage for future conflicts. Ian Wood writes, "The Lex Burgundionum exemplifies the hybrid legal systems of the post-Roman world, combining elements of Roman and Germanic traditions to address the complexities of Burgundian society." Walter Goffart adds, "The legislative efforts of Gundobad reflect the pragmatic adaptations of barbarian rulers who sought to legitimize their authority within a Romanized cultural framework." And Peter Heather concludes, "Gundobad's codification of Burgundian law was both a tool of governance and a symbol of his kingdom's synthesis of Roman and Germanic identities." Despite the achievements of Gundobad and the relative stability of the Burgundian kingdom during his reign, the foundations of Burgundian power were far from secure. By the early 6th century, the political landscape of Gaul was dominated by the Franks, whose territorial ambitions posed a direct threat to their neighbours. The rise of Clovis I and his successors fundamentally altered the balance of power, setting the stage for the Burgundians' decline. One of the most significant factors in the Burgundians' decline was their geographic vulnerability. The Alpine region of Sapaudia, while defensible, was relatively isolated and lacked the resources to sustain prolonged resistance against a more powerful adversary. Following Gundobad's death in 516 AD, the Burgundian kingdom entered a period of instability. His successors, Sigismund and Godemar, faced challenges in maintaining the unity and authority established during Gundobad's reign. Sigismund's conversion to Nicene Christianity initially helped to strengthen ties with his Roman subjects, but it also alienated some of the Burgundian aristocracy who remained Arian Christians. In 523 AD, Sigismund's reign ended in tragedy when he was captured and executed by the Franks. This event marked the beginning of the end for the Burgundian kingdom. Under the leadership of Childebert I and Clotaire I, the sons of Clovis, the Franks launched a series of campaigns to conquer the Burgundian territories. These campaigns were not merely territorial disputes, but also reflected the Franks' broader ambition to dominate Gaul and integrate its diverse populations under their rule. The annexation of the Burgundian kingdom was part of a broader pattern in which smaller post-Roman states were absorbed into larger polities. For the Franks, the conquest of Burgundy represented both a military triumph and an opportunity to consolidate their control over Gaul. For the Burgundians, it marked the end of their independent history, but not the end of their legacy. The Burgundians' decline and fall remind us of the fragility of power in a time of rapid change, yet their contributions to the cultural and legal evolution of medieval Europe ensured that their memory would not be forgotten. Ian Wood explores those events. The final annexation of the Burgundian kingdom by the Franks in 534 AD was not merely the result of military superiority, but also a reflection of the broader political shifts in Gaul during the early 6th century. Guy Halsall furthermore writes, "The conquest of the Burgundians by the Franks illustrates the gradual consolidation of power in Gaul, a process driven by both military expansion and the absorption of existing legal and cultural systems." Peter Heather notes, "The annexation of Burgundy was part of a larger Frankish strategy to dominate Gaul, incorporating diverse regions into a cohesive political and cultural framework." Walter Goffart observes, "The Burgundian kingdom's fall demonstrates the limits of smaller post-Roman states in resisting the territorial ambitions of larger, more centralized powers like the Franks." And Patrick J. Geary concludes, "The absorption of the Burgundians into the Frankish kingdom marked a turning point in the transformation of Gaul, with Burgundian law and identity contributing to the evolving Frankish state." Though the Burgundian kingdom ceased to exist as an independent political entity after its annexation by the Franks in 534 AD, its legacy endured in multiple ways. The Burgundians left an indelible mark on the legal, cultural, and political landscape of early medieval Europe, influencing the societies that succeeded them. One of the most significant contributions of the Burgundians was their legal code, the Lex Burgundionum. Codified during the reign of Gundobad and expanded by his successors, this legal framework blended Germanic customary law with Roman legal principles, creating a hybrid system that was both innovative and practical. The code addressed issues such as property disputes, marriage, and criminal justice, reflecting the complexities of a society that was both Romanized and Germanic. The Lex Burgundionum continued to be used even after the Burgundian kingdom's fall, influencing Frankish legal traditions and serving as a model for other early medieval codes. Its survival demonstrates the Burgundians' role in shaping the legal foundations of medieval Europe, particularly in regions that had been part of their former kingdom. Culturally, the Burgundians were instrumental in bridging the worlds of Rome and the Germanic tribes. Their kingdom was a melting pot of traditions, where Romanized subjects lived alongside Burgundian elites, and Arian Christianity coexisted with Nicene beliefs. This cultural synthesis played a critical role in the transformation of Gaul during late antiquity, influencing everything from architecture and art to religious practices. This literary legacy ensured that the Burgundians were remembered long after their political disappearance. The Nibelungenlied and related works were not only popular in medieval Europe, but also influenced later artistic and literary traditions, including operas by Richard Wagner and 19th century Romantic nationalism. Politically, the integration of the Burgundians into the Frankish realm set a precedent for the absorption of smaller kingdoms into larger polities. Their legal and administrative systems provided a framework that the Franks adopted and adapted, contributing to the cohesion of the Merovingian and Carolingian empires. The former Burgundian territories became a vital part of the Frankish realm, and the Burgundians' legacy lived on through their influence on Frankish governance and culture. Though their kingdom was short-lived compared to the empires that followed, the Burgundians played a critical role in the transformation of Europe during late antiquity. Their story is one of resilience, adaptation, and enduring influence, reminding us that even in the shadows of history, smaller powers can leave a lasting impact. Ian Wood notes, the Lex Burgundionum not only provided a practical legal framework for Burgundian society, but also served as a bridge between Roman and Germanic legal traditions, influencing the development of early medieval law. Guy Halsall writes, the legacy of the Burgundians lies in their ability to integrate diverse cultural elements, from Roman legal systems to Germanic warrior traditions, creating a hybrid society that shaped the post-Roman world. And Walter Goffart concludes, the Burgundian contribution to medieval European culture is evident not only in their legal codes, but also in their enduring place in legend and literature, exemplified by the Nibelungenlied. The story of the Burgundians is one of transformation and resilience, from their early migrations out of the Baltic region to the establishment of two distinct kingdoms. They navigated the complexities of a collapsing Roman world with remarkable adaptability. Their survival after the destruction of their first kingdom at Worms was a testament to their resourcefulness, and their subsequent rise in Sapordia showcased their ability to integrate Roman administrative practices while preserving their Germanic identity. Under leaders like Gundobad, the Burgundians played a key role in shaping the post-Roman world. Their legal innovations, particularly the Lex Burgundionum, bridged the divide between Roman and Germanic traditions, providing a model for governance that outlived their kingdom. This legal code was not only a practical tool for uniting a diverse population, but also a symbol of Burgundian contributions to the development of medieval European law. Their political story is equally significant. The Burgundians' integration into the Frankish kingdom after 534 AD marked the end of their independence, but not their influence. Their former territories became vital components of the Merovingian and later Carolingian realms, contributing to the consolidation of power in Gaul and the emergence of medieval France. The Burgundian cultural and legal legacy continued to shape the regions they once ruled, becoming a part of the broader fabric of the Frankish state. The Burgundians also left an enduring mark on European literature and culture. The Nibelungenlied, one of the great epics of the medieval world, immortalized their story, weaving their historical struggles into a narrative of heroism, tragedy, and myth. Figures like Gunther and the Fall of Worms became symbols of a bygone age, resonating through centuries of artistic and literary interpretations. The legacy of the Burgundians serves as a reminder of the dynamic interplay between migration, cultural integration, and state-building during late antiquity. While their kingdom was relatively short-lived, their impact was profound, contributing to the transition from the Roman world to medieval Europe. As we conclude the story of the Burgundians, we recognize their place in the broader narrative of late antiquity, a time when empires fell, new powers rose, and the foundations of modern Europe were laid. Though they are often overshadowed by larger and more powerful kingdoms, the Burgundians remind us that even small states can leave a lasting legacy. Ian Wood concludes their story. The Burgundians' history exemplifies the integration of Roman and Germanic traditions, from their legal systems to their cultural identity, influencing the broader transformation of the late antique world. Walter Goffert furthermore examines the Burgundians' adaptation to Roman administrative practices and their eventual absorption into the Frankish realm highlight the fluidity of identity and governance during late antiquity. Guy Halsall writes, "The Nibelungenlied and the Lex Burgundionum are enduring reminders of the Burgundians' contributions to both European culture and law, bridging the divide between myth and history." Peter Heather adds, "The Burgundians' legacy lies in their ability to create a lasting hybrid society where elements of Roman culture and Germanic tradition coexisted and thrived." And we will finish with Patrick J. Geary. The Burgundians' role in the Frankish realm demonstrates the enduring influence of smaller barbarian kingdoms in shaping the political and cultural landscape of medieval Europe. As we already saw in the previous chapters of our video, the collapse of the Western Roman Empire unleashed a wave of migrations that forever reshaped Europe. Groups like the Huns, Goths, Vandals, about whom we already spoke, and Franks and Anglo-Saxons, about whom we will speak later, surged across the continent, each leaving their mark on history. Among these migrating peoples, the Lombards carved out a unique path. From their origins in Scandinavia to their kingdom in Italy, they transformed from wandering warriors to rulers of one of the most sophisticated kingdoms of early medieval Europe. Unlike the rapid, destructive campaigns of the Huns or the seafaring raids of the Vandals, the Lombards followed a slower, deliberate route. Their journey southward reflected adaptability, endurance, and ambition, culminating in a kingdom that would shape Italian and European history. This chapter delves into their migration, kingdom, and enduring legacy. The story of the Lombards begins in the far north, in the cold and rugged landscapes of Scandinavia. According to their historian Paul the Deacon, the Lombards, then called the Winnerly, were a small and hardy tribe. Over time, driven by unknown pressures, they began their migration southward. The very name Lombards, or Langobardi in Latin, carries both mythological and cultural significance. Traditionally interpreted as long beards, the name reflects their warrior ethos, with the beard symbolizing strength and masculinity in Germanic culture. According to the Lombard historian Paul the Deacon, their name originated from a myth. When the tribe was still known as the Winnerly, their women let their hair down and tied it around their faces like beards to deceive the god Woden or Odin, who then declared them Longbeards. This name, rooted in both legend and identity, accompanied them on their migration from the north and became a symbol of their enduring legacy in Italy. By the 1st century AD, the Lombards had settled near the Elbe River in northern Germany. Here they established themselves as a distinct group, engaging in trade, skirmishes, and alliances with neighbouring tribes. Like many Germanic tribes, the Lombards came into contact with the Roman Empire as they migrated further south. By the 5th century, they had reached Pannonia in present-day Hungary. At times, the Romans employed them as federati, military allies, who were granted land in exchange for their support in defending the empire's frontiers. Herwig Wolfram, in his comprehensive work, The Roman Empire and its Germanic Peoples, Wolfram discusses the Lombards' early movements. The Lombards, originally from Scandinavia, migrated southward through the Elbe River region, eventually settling in Pannonia by the 5th century. Walter Pohl, prominent Austrian historian, writes, The Lombards, like other Germanic tribes, engaged in both conflict and cooperation with the Roman Empire during their migration into Pannonia. Neil Christie is specialized in archaeology and history of late antiquity, focusing on barbarian settlements in Europe. He notes, by the 1st century AD, the Lombards had established themselves along the Elbe River, interacting with neighboring tribes and the Roman Empire. Jörg Janut, early medieval historian with a focus on the Lombards and other Germanic tribes, concludes, the Lombards' journey from Scandinavia to Pannonia involved complex interactions with various tribes and the Roman Empire, highlighting their adaptability and resilience. In 568 AD, the Lombards, under the leadership of King Alboin, began their migration into Italy. Unlike earlier barbarian invasions, their entry into Italy was not marked by immediate chaos. Instead, they moved systematically, taking advantage of the Byzantine Empire's weakness after decades of war and instability. Alboin's leadership was critical in these early conquests. A capable warrior and strategist, he forged alliances with other tribes and led his people to seize much of northern Italy. However, his reign ended tragically in 572 AD. Alboin was assassinated in a palace conspiracy, allegedly orchestrated by his wife, Queen Rosamund, after he humiliated her by forcing her to drink from a goblet made of her father's skull. Following Alboin's death, the Lombard kingdom faced internal strife, yet under leaders like King Authari, the kingdom stabilized. Authari's marriage to Theodelinda, a Catholic Bavarian princess, symbolized a turning point. Theodelinda worked tirelessly to promote Catholicism among the Lombard elite, forging closer ties with the papacy. Herwig Wolfram writes, in 568 AD, under King Alboin, the Lombards crossed the Julian Alps into Italy, exploiting the weakened state of Byzantine control in the region. Walter Pohl adds, following their invasion, the Lombards established a kingdom in northern Italy, with Pavia as its capital, marking a significant shift in the region's political landscape. And Neil Christie concludes, King Alboin's strategic acumen was evident in his ability to unite various tribes and lead a successful campaign into Italy, laying the foundation for Lombard rule. Under rulers like King Agilulf and Queen Theodelinda, the Lombard kingdom expanded further. Agilulf proved to be a strong and capable leader, defending the kingdom from Byzantine attacks and consolidating its borders. One of the most significant achievements of this era was the Edict of Rothari, issued in 643 AD. This legal code, named after King Rothari, blended Germanic traditions with Roman legal principles. It provided a stable framework for governance and reflected the Lombards' growing sophistication. Religion also played a central role in the Lombards' transformation. Figures like Saint Columbanus established monasteries such as Bobbio Abbey, which became centers of learning and spirituality. With Queen Theodelinda's support, the Lombards gradually converted to Christianity, moving away from their earlier pagan beliefs. Jörg Janut writes, under King Agilulf, the Lombard kingdom expanded its territories and began integrating Roman administrative practices, leading to a more structured governance system. Walter Pohl examines the cultural transformation of the Lombards. The Lombards' gradual conversion to Christianity, influenced by figures like Queen Theodelinda, marked a significant cultural shift from their pagan origins to a more Romanized Christian identity. Neil Christie concludes, King Rothari's issuance of the edict in 643 AD was a pivotal moment, codifying Lombard laws and blending Germanic customs with Roman legal traditions. By the early 8th century, the Lombard kingdom had reached its zenith under rulers like King Liutprand, who strengthened central authority, expanded the kingdom, and improved relations with the papacy. However, this golden age was short-lived. Internal divisions and external pressures would soon spell the end of the Lombard kingdom. Like many early medieval kingdoms, the Lombards struggled with internal discord. Noble families vied for power, weakening the monarchy's ability to enforce authority across the kingdom. Regional dukes, who were granted significant autonomy, often acted as independent rulers rather than loyal subjects of the king. This fragmentation created political instability, undermining the central government's ability to defend its borders. While the Lombards wrestled with internal challenges, a rising power in the north began to threaten their existence. The Frankish kingdom, under the leadership of Charlemagne, was rapidly expanding. Charlemagne's military campaigns aimed to consolidate his rule over Europe and support the papacy, which increasingly viewed the Lombards as a threat. Tensions between the Lombards and the papacy had simmered for decades, while earlier rulers like Queen Theodelinda and King Liutprand worked to strengthen ties with the Catholic Church. Later, Lombard kings, particularly Desiderius, came into conflict with the papacy. Desiderius attempted to assert control over central Italy, threatening papal independence. This led Pope Adrian I to seek help from Charlemagne, forging an alliance that would prove fatal for the Lombards. In 773 AD, Charlemagne responded to the papacy's call for aid. Leading a formidable Frankish army, he crossed the Alps and invaded the Lombard kingdom. The campaign was swift and decisive. By 774 AD, Charlemagne's forces laid siege to Pavia, the Lombard capital. After months of resistance, Pavia fell. King Desiderius was captured and sent into exile in a monastery, marking the end of Lombard rule. Charlemagne declared himself King of the Lombards, incorporating their territory into the expanding Frankish Empire. Jörg Janut discusses the internal divisions that weakened the Lombard kingdom. The autonomy of regional dukes and the rivalry among noble families significantly undermined the central authority, leading to political fragmentation and instability within the Lombard kingdom. Walter Pohl examines the external pressures from the Franks. The expansionist policies of the Frankish kingdom under Charlemagne posed a formidable threat to the Lombards, as the Franks sought to consolidate their power in Europe and support the papacy against Lombard encroachments. Herwig Wolfram analyzes the papal conflict. Pope Adrian I's alliance with Charlemagne was a strategic move to counter Lombard aggression, leading to a military campaign that culminated in the fall of Pavia and the end of the Lombard kingdom. Neil Christie provides insights into the aftermath of the Lombard defeat. Despite their political downfall, Lombard legal codes and cultural practices persisted, influencing the governance and societal structures in Italy under Frankish rule. Though their kingdom fell to Charlemagne in 774 AD, the Lombards left an enduring legacy. Their influence can be seen in the legal, cultural, and political foundations of medieval Europe. Far from being lost to history, the Lombards' contributions shaped Italy and its neighbours for centuries. The very name Lombardy reminds us of the Lombards' lasting presence. Place names throughout northern Italy bear their mark, reflecting the regions where their rule was strongest. Even as their kingdom fell, their identity became ingrained in the fabric of the land. One of the Lombards' most significant contributions was their legal codification. The Edict of Rothari, issued in 643 AD, remained influential long after their kingdom's fall. This legal code blended Germanic customs with Roman law, creating a system that guided governance in Italy even under Frankish rule. Charlemagne's conquest did not erase Lombard influence. Instead, the Franks incorporated Lombard legal traditions into their administration, ensuring that elements of Lombard governance endured. This continuity helped shape the development of European legal systems during the early Middle Ages. The Lombards played a crucial role in the Christianization of Italy, Earlier kings, like Agilulf and Queen Theodelinda, embraced Catholicism, promoting its spread among the Lombard elite. Their support for the church laid the groundwork for a closer relationship between Italian rulers and the papacy. Religious figures like Saint Columbanus, who established Bobbio Abbey, turned Lombard territories into centres of spirituality and learning. These monasteries preserved classical knowledge and fostered the intellectual growth of medieval Europe. Our understanding of the Lombards comes largely from the writings of Paul the Deacon, a Lombard historian and monk. His Historia Langobardorum chronicles their migration, kings, and achievements, preserving the memory of their people long after their kingdom disappeared. Paul the Deacon's work not only provided a detailed account of Lombard history, but also ensured their place in the broader narrative of early medieval Europe. Culturally, the Lombards left a significant mark. Their architecture and artistic traditions blended Germanic and Roman styles, influencing later developments in Italian art and design. This cultural integration was a testament to their ability to adapt and innovate within the regions they controlled. The Lombards' story is part of a larger transformation from the classical world to medieval Europe. Their adoption of feudal structures, their legal innovations, and their Christianization efforts helped lay the groundwork for the societies that followed. While their kingdom may have fallen, the Lombards' contributions lived on in the structures and institutions that shaped the medieval world. From their laws to their religious contributions, from their cultural integration to their regional identity, the Lombards left an indelible mark on history. Their legacy reminds us that even after defeat, a people's influence can resonate across centuries, shaping the future in ways they could scarcely imagine. Yogyanut discusses the enduring influence of Lombard legal codes. The Edict of Rothari, promulgated in 643 AD, remained a foundational legal text in Italy, influencing subsequent legal developments even after the Lombard kingdom's fall. Walter Pole examines the Lombards' role in the Christianization of Italy. The conversion of the Lombard elite to Catholicism under rulers like Queen Theodelinda facilitated the integration of Lombard and Roman religious practices, leaving a lasting impact on the religious landscape of Italy. Neil Christie provides insights into the Lombards' cultural contributions. Lombard art and architecture, characterized by a fusion of Germanic and Roman elements, significantly influenced the aesthetic development of medieval Italian culture. Herwig Wolfram analyzes the Lombards' integration into the Frankish realm. Following their conquest by Charlemagne, the Lombards were assimilated into the Carolingian Empire, yet their legal and administrative traditions persisted, contributing to the governance structures of medieval Europe. In an age forged by blood and chaos, a new order would rise from the ashes of a fallen empire. This is the story of Britain's brutal transformation, where warlords clashed, kingdoms crumbled, and heroes emerged from the shadows. From the last remnants of Roman rule to the unstoppable force of Viking invasions, the land was forever scarred by centuries of conflict and survival. As the legions of Rome retreated in 410 AD, they left behind a fractured, vulnerable province, an island abandoned to its fate. What followed was a relentless struggle, a saga of Anglo-Saxon kingdoms fighting for dominance in a world consumed by chaos. The peaceful order of Roman Britain was gone, replaced by a maelstrom of war, betrayal, and survival. In this episode, we unravel the epic tale of how these Germanic invaders, the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, rose to power, shaping the destiny of an entire island. From the desperate cries of the Britons to the war drums of Viking raiders, the land was torn apart. Yet amid the destruction, a figure looms on the horizon, a man destined to unite a broken people and face the greatest threat of them all. Alfred the Great's rise is imminent, but before he can step into history, we must first journey through the blood-soaked centuries that preceded him. This is not just the story of kingdoms and kings. It's the story of a people fighting for survival, of warriors and rulers striving to claim their place in a changing world. This is the Anglo-Saxon saga. In this chapter, we delve into the fascinating history of the early Anglo-Saxon period, a critical era that bridges the decline of Roman Britain and the rise of medieval England. Set against the backdrop of late antiquity, this period offers a unique window into a world shaped by migration, cultural transformation, and the birth of new kingdoms. So far in our exploration of late antiquity, we have uncovered the tumultuous histories of the Huns, Goths, Vandals, Lombards, Burgundians, and Franks, peoples whose actions defined the fall of Rome and the emergence of early medieval Europe. Now, we turn our focus to the shores of Britain, where the Anglo-Saxons began their rise, shaping the cultural and political landscape of the island in ways that still echo today. Join us as we uncover the origins, society, and early struggles of these remarkable peoples. To guide us through this captivating journey, we will rely on the insights of prominent historians and their groundbreaking works. From the archaeological perspectives of Helena Hamerow to the political analyses of Nicholas J. Hyam and Barbara York, we will uncover how the Anglo-Saxons transitioned from migrants to kingdom builders, leaving an indelible mark on history. With the help of John Heinz's studies on cultural identity, Catherine Hill's exploration of origins, and David Dumville's work on political evolution, we'll paint a vivid picture of the early Anglo-Saxon world. These historians provide us with the tools to unravel the complexities of this period, offering invaluable perspectives on migration, settlement, and the foundations of English society. Together, we'll piece together the story of the Anglo-Saxons, one that begins amidst the upheaval of late antiquity and sets the stage for the medieval world to come. The amount of books and academic research on the early Anglo-Saxon period is vast, reflecting the deep interest and meticulous scholarship devoted to this era. With so many outstanding works available, we face the challenging task of deciding which books and historians to include in our exploration. We carefully selected works that best align with the themes and questions we seek to address in this chapter. However, we fully acknowledge that some exceptional books and brilliant historians may have been left out. This is not a reflection on their importance or the quality of their research, but rather a necessity given the scope of this video. We hope you'll see this as an invitation to delve deeper into the rich scholarship on this fascinating period, as there is always more to discover and learn. Let's embark on this journey together, guided by the works we've chosen to illuminate the Anglo-Saxon story. As we saw in our previous video about the King Alaric and Visigoths, the Western Roman Empire was in a state of severe decline in the early 5th century. Pressured by invasions from multiple fronts and internal political chaos, the empire could no longer defend its distant provinces. In 410 AD, in that exact year, Visigoths under King Alaric sacked Rome. The Roman Emperor Honorius made a decision that would forever change the fate of Britain. He sent a letter to the Romano-British cities, instructing them to look to their own defences, effectively signalling the withdrawal of Roman military presence from the island. This letter, often referred to as the Rescript of Honorius, was a response to the dire situation in Britain, which had been left vulnerable due to the withdrawal of Roman military forces. Simon Esmond Cleary, in his book In the Ending of Roman Britain, discusses the complexities of Honorius's decision by stating, "The withdrawal from Britain was not a single event, but a process reflecting the empire's shifting priorities and the pressing need to defend its heartlands." He also suggests that the letter's significance may have been overstated, emphasizing that Roman influence in Britain had already diminished significantly by 410 AD. Peter Solway, a British historian, examines the broader context, noting Honorius's directive to the Britons to look to their own defences was a pragmatic response to the empire's inability to provide military support amid internal crises. And Michael Jones analyses the administrative challenges, asserting the abandonment of Britannia was part of a series of strategic withdrawals as the Western Roman Empire faced increasing pressures from various fronts. For nearly 4 centuries, Britain had been a part of the Roman Empire, benefiting from its advanced infrastructure, military protection, and administrative organization. The Hadrian's Wall, built in 122 AD, had once protected the northern frontier from Pictish tribes, while towns like Londinium, modern London, and Eboracum, modern York, had flourished as Roman provincial capitals. But as the legions departed in the early 5th century, Britain was left defenceless, vulnerable to raids and internal fragmentation. Shepard Frere was one of the leading British archaeologists and historians specialising in Roman Britain. His book, Britannia, A History of Roman Britain, is considered a foundational work in the study of Roman Britain, providing comprehensive insights into the province's archaeology and history. Regarding Roman occupation of Britain, he states, "The Roman occupation of Britain was a complex and multifaceted process involving military conquest, economic exploitation, and cultural assimilation." Peter Solway furthermore notes, the Romanization of Britain was not a uniform process. It varied greatly across different regions and social strata, reflecting a mosaic of experiences under Roman rule. David Mattingly is a professor of Roman archaeology at the University of Leicester with a focus on the Roman Empire's provinces, including Britain in an imperial possession, Britain in the Roman Empire. He observes, Roman Britain was a frontier province, and its history is marked by a constant tension between the forces of imperial control and local resistance. The Romano-British elites, who had long relied on Roman support, now found themselves struggling to maintain order. Without the logistical and military backbone of Rome, local rulers attempted to assert authority, but their power was often fragmented and contested. Magnus Maximus, a Roman general who had previously ruled parts of Britain, had already stripped the island of a substantial portion of its troops in 383 AD, when he led a campaign to the continent. This depletion of forces only worsened the situation as the 5th century progressed. By 411 AD, the effects of the Roman withdrawal were painfully evident. Pictish tribes from the north, Scotty raiders from Ireland, and the Saxons from across the North Sea began to intensify their attacks on Britain's coasts and settlements. The remaining Britons, many of whom were descendants of Romanized citizens, found it increasingly difficult to fend off these incursions. Towns and villas that had once been symbols of Roman prosperity were abandoned or fell into disrepair. Adding to the turmoil, the Saxons, Germanic warriors from present-day northern Germany and southern Denmark, saw Britain as ripe for settlement. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, a historical record compiled centuries later, hints at this growing presence, noting the increasing raids by Saxon pirates and the inability of the native Britons to defend themselves against the new wave of invaders. Peter Solway notes, the departure of Roman troops left a power vacuum that led to the fragmentation of political authority and the rise of local warlords. David Mattingly writes, the absence of the Roman military presence resulted in increased vulnerability to external threats, notably from Picts, Scots, and Saxon raiders. And Shepard Frere concludes, the economic infrastructure, heavily reliant on Roman administration and protection, began to deteriorate rapidly following the military withdrawal, leading to a decline in urban life and trade. In an effort to secure some form of defence, local rulers like Vortigern, a British king, made a decision that would have long-lasting consequences. Vortigern is believed to have come to power around 425 AD, capitalizing on this instability. Around 449 AD, Vortigern invited the Saxons to Britain, hoping they would act as mercenaries and protect his kingdom from the Picts and Scots. The figure of Vortigern is shrouded in controversy due to conflicting historical accounts and interpretations. We will address these controversies with help of some important historians. John Morris was an English historian who specialized in the study of the institutions of the Roman Empire and the history of sub-Roman Britain. He discusses the complexities of Vortigern's portrayal, stating, "The accounts of Vortigern are a blend of history and legend, making it challenging to discern the true nature of his leadership and actions during the Anglo-Saxon settlement." Guy Halsall, historian who we are already very familiar with from previous chapters, examines the dubious historicity of Vortigern, noting the figure of Vortigern may be more a construct of later medieval writers than a reflection of an actual historical personage. Nicholas John Hyam is a British archaeologist, historian and academic. He explores the narrative inconsistencies, stating Vortigern's story varies significantly across sources, indicating a complex interplay between myth and history in early British chronicles. Barbara York is a historian of Anglo-Saxon England. She highlights the political motivations behind Vortigern's depiction, asserting the negative portrayal of Vortigern in certain sources may reflect the biases of authors aiming to explain the loss of British territories to the Anglo-Saxons. Leslie Alcock was Professor of Archaeology at the University of Glasgow and one of the leading archaeologists of early medieval Britain. He addresses the archaeological challenges, stating, despite various claims, there is a lack of concrete archaeological evidence to conclusively identify sites associated with Vortigern, adding to the uncertainty of his historical footprint. Hengist and Horsa, leaders of the Jutes, also arrived with their forces. The Saxons initially helped drive back the invaders, but soon became dissatisfied with their treatment and began to turn against Vortigern. Their growing power led to conflicts that ultimately resulted in Vortigern losing control over his kingdom. According to some sources, Vortigern married Rowena, the daughter of Hengist, in an attempt to solidify his alliance with the Saxons. This union is often portrayed as both a political maneuver and a source of tension. Following his marriage alliance, tensions escalated between Vortigern's forces and the Saxons. Notably, his son Vortimer fought valiantly against them but was ultimately killed in battle. This defeat marked a significant turning point in Vortigern's reign. By 457 AD, Vortigern faced a decisive defeat at Crayford against Saxon forces. Following this loss, he fled to North Wales, effectively ending his rule and marking a shift in power towards the Anglo-Saxons, who began to occupy more territory in Britain. Regarding Crayford battle in 457, Nicholas J. Hyam notes, "The Battle of Crayford was a pivotal moment, leading to the retreat of British forces and the consolidation of Anglo-Saxon control in Kent." Barbara York states, "The engagement at Crayford exemplifies the escalating conflicts of the period, resulting in significant territorial gains for the Anglo-Saxons." Historian Martin Welch observes, "The victory at Crayford allowed the Anglo-Saxon settlers to establish a stronger foothold in southeastern Britain, influencing the region's subsequent cultural and political development." Vortigern is often portrayed negatively in historical texts. He is seen as a foolish king whose decisions allowed for the permanent settlement of Saxons in Britain, leading to centuries of conflict and cultural change. His story has been embellished through legends and medieval literature, contributing to the narrative of British history during this era. He is frequently mentioned in works like Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain, which further romanticized his life and reign. Vortigern remains a controversial figure in British history, viewed as both a desperate ruler trying to protect his people and as one whose actions inadvertently facilitated the decline of native British power in favour of incoming Saxon settlers. His legacy serves as a cautionary tale about alliances and leadership during times of crisis. By the mid-5th century, the once unified Roman province of Britannia had fractured into small competing kingdoms. The Roman roads, which had once been the arteries of trade and communication, now connected fragmented, isolated communities. Towns that had thrived under Roman rule fell into disrepair or were abandoned entirely. The surviving Romano-British population, increasingly isolated, clung to their Roman identity and traditions, but their hold on power was slipping away. The Saxons, along with other Germanic tribes like the Angles and Jutes, were laying the foundation for what would become the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. Before we start explaining formation of early Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, we will once again turn to prominent historians to conclude this early period of Anglo-Saxon history. Nicholas J. Hyam writes, "The Anglo-Saxon migration was a process rather than an event, with implications for variations of the process over time, resulting in chronological and geographical diversity of immigrant groups." Barbara York furthermore notes, "The formation of early Anglo-Saxon kingdoms was a gradual process, marked by the consolidation of power by local chieftains and the establishment of regional identities." And Catherine Hills, a British archaeologist and academic who is a leading expert in Anglo-Saxon material culture, concludes the transformation of Britain into England was not solely due to mass migrations, but also involved the assimilation and adaptation of the indigenous population to Anglo-Saxon culture. By the mid-6th century, Britain was a mosaic of emerging Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, each built on the ashes of Roman Britain. The Saxons had claimed much of the southern territory, while the Angles and Jutes established footholds in the east and north. These groups gradually displaced or assimilated the Romano-British population, who struggled to maintain their culture and identity in the face of relentless expansion. The Kingdom of Kent, founded by the Jutes in the mid-5th century, was among the first major Anglo-Saxon polities to emerge. The kingdom's founding is traditionally linked to the arrival of Hengist and Horsa, two Jutish brothers invited by Vortigern to help defend his lands against the Picts. Barbara York, in Kings and Kingdoms of Early Anglo-Saxon England, discusses the legendary status of Hengist and Horsa, stating, "The stories concerning them should be seen as part of Kentish foundation legends rather than as records of historical events." Nicholas J. Hyam examines the sources mentioning Hengist and Horsa, noting, "The accounts of Hengist and Horsa are derived from much later sources and are likely to be more reflective of the period in which they were written than of the 5th century." And Martin Welch addresses the lack of archaeological evidence, stating, "There is no archaeological evidence to support the existence of Hengist and Horsa as historical figures. Their story is likely a later construction." The story of the so-called barbarians did not end with the fall of Rome. It was only the beginning. If you want to continue exploring how Europe was shaped in the centuries that followed, don't miss our in-depth video on the history of Spain, from the Visigoths to the Islamic conquests and beyond. And for those fascinated by Britain's dark transformation after Rome, watch our most acclaimed episode, Anglo-Saxon Saga, The Long Road to United England. A powerful journey through chaos, kingship, and the making of a nation. This is serious history, told with depth, clarity, and passion. Subscribe, join the journey, and rediscover the roots of Europe.